Good day, everyone. Welcome to Deku Universe. Today we are beginning part 1 of What If Deku was hit with gender exchange quirk. The fanfiction is created by Anthony Tyler 9 on Wattpad. Now let's begin. Izuku and his classmates were walking to the Kiyashi shopping ward. They had been sent to get supplies they would need in order to go to the summer camp. Izuku had been walking with Uraraka and Todoroki as they searched for their own supplies for the camp. As they were moving about the mall, they had gathered their friends and went to the stores of which they needed their supplies. Izuku had just separated from the group in order to collect some supplies of his own so that he could be prepared for the camp. He had gone camping in the past with the Bakugos since his mother had to work at the hospital for a week, and they decided to go camping for that time. It was the most fun he had ever since Kaken had decided to just be rude to him because of his quirklessness. Izuku didn't mind the bullying. He knew that his best friend could become a hero. He just needed to fix his attitude, and he would become one of the greatest heroes out there. He was entering a store when he felt someone place their full palm on his back as he felt something change deep within himself. Nothing bad happened when he felt the slight sting of pain, but as soon as he turned around to find out who touched his lower back, he found nobody present. Shrugging the odd encounter with a customer, he entered the store and grabbed the things and paid for them when he started to feel woozy. It wasn't the I need to sleep now kind of woozy, just some slight tiredness that would make him seem more tired than usual. He just thought that his body was just more sore than usual since he had a practical exam not even 5 hours earlier leading up to the shopping trip. As soon as he entered the main courtyard of the shopping ward, he felt someone grab the back of his neck, and as soon as he looked to his left, he found Shigaraki Tamura gleefully smiling at him. "Hey there, hero," the villain said, smirking at him. "I want to know why Stain is getting all the attention. It's all Stain this and all. Might that. I hate it. What makes the hero killer so much better than what I've done? I attacked the USJ, I attacked Hosu, and one fight with a bunch of high schoolers gets the top news." Shigaraki ranted softly. "Well, what are you fighting for?" Izuku asked, as Shigaraki gave his answer of killing All Might. "No. I mean, what is the end goal after killing All Might? Is there anything else you wish to do once your dream of killing All Might is over?" Izuku asked, concerned. Never thought about that. All I ever wanted to do was destroy anything that made me angry as well as sad. Never thought about what happens after I do it," Shigaraki said, as Izuku rubbed his legs together. "Well, what do you want to do once you're villainous? Actions have no reason for doing anything anymore?" Izuku asked. For some reason his body was making weird feelings come across the situation for himself, and it wasn't helping him as his body was becoming more and more heated. I never thought about what I wanted to do. After killing All Might, I might just become a hardcore gamer," the young man said as Izuku looked at the man for a second. Why couldn't you just become a gamer before becoming a villain?" Izuku asked, fishing for more information. "Well, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to play games. Never really knew why, but they helped me with my anger issues. And it was a way for me to leave the human world," Shigaraki said, looking to the sky before smiling and letting Izuku go. "You've given me a lot of things to think about, Deku. See you next time we meet, because when we do, I will kill you," Shigaraki said, showing his creepy smile. As soon as the man left the mall, Izuku ran to find somewhere to hide and messaged his friends about his encounter with Shigaraki and that he was at the men's bathroom. Todoroki had entered the bathroom in order to see what was going on with Izuku. He had gotten a message the boy had sent him about his emergency and found the boy in the bathroom sweating up a storm. "Midoriya, what happened to you? You look like you ran a marathon," Todoroki asked bluntly and rushed to the boy. "I don't know. All I know is that ever since before Shigaraki came to me, my body has been feeling weird," Izuku explained as Todoroki nodded. Unknown to either of the boys, Uraraka had her own problems such as growing something that shouldn't have been there. When Uraraka had left Izuku alone in the shopping ward, She had initially left because she didn't want to be left alone with her crush. But when she entered a shop near the one where Izuku was entering, she felt a palm strike her back, and she stumbled forward a bit before noticing nothing happening to herself. Looking back, she found someone running away from the area, and she thought nothing of it and continued on her journey. She was about to leave the store when she had felt something wrong with her body, as if there was something not right with it as she felt her body shift. Her endorphins had changed, and she was given TSDRN as she grew slightly in height, and her hair shortened just a tad. She felt like her chest was shortening more than it should, and as soon as she got a message from Izuku, she felt like she needed to see if something was wrong with him as well. Call it gut feeling, but it seemed like every other day the boy was getting involved in something completely scandalous, but was capable of escaping it with his life. So as she entered the bathroom, she found that Todoroki had entered the men's bathroom next to the women's restroom. She was about to head home for the day when Ishido had entered the bathroom and walked over to her stall as she asked what she was doing in there. "In nothing. Jay just needed to go. I think I'll head home after this," Ochako said, as unknown to her. Izuku was saying something similar to Todoroki. They both left the bathroom at the same time and found that each other's bodies were changing on a genetic level. What happened to you? Uraraka-san? Izuku asked, his worrying dad mode coming into play. "I could say the same thing about you, Deku-kun," Ochako said, as she had blushed at how much more adorable he looked. He was shorter now, but he was still just as powerful as he was originally. But the added bonus for her mind was how feminine he was looking. As soon as she banished the thought from her head, she ran OU to go home, as Izuku shouted that he hopes she gets better. She shouted the same back to him as they both returned home in order to tell their parents, via phone or in person, about their day at the shopping mall. Izuku woke up the next morning, the day of the move to the summer training camp, with his whole body feeling like he had the best sleep in his life. His chest was feeling definitively heavier than it used to be, but at the same time, it felt like he was in the ideal body he always wanted. "That's weird. Never thought that having my chest be a bit heavier." Izuku was about to finish his sentence when he noticed how high his voice sounded. How is that possible? MME voice isn't what it's supposed to sound like. I need to talk to Recovery Girl, All Might, or Aizawa-sensei about this, Izuku thought in his head. But then he realized something. His thoughts were more feminine sounding as well, and that was when he got out of bed and ran to the bathroom in order to look at himself in the mirror. As soon as he looked at himself in the mirror, he found that he was obviously shorter than he used to be at 5 feet 5 inches, but now he was around 5 foot in height. But he also had a feminine-looking face and hair, body, as well as his arms were less muscular than it used to be as a male. The most outstanding part about himself was the fact that his chest was much, much bigger than it used to be. Placing a hand on the ending piece of fat hanging from his chest, he felt himself internally from the soft hands, grabbing them. "Okay, so they're real. What in the world had happened?" Izuku muttered to himself. Leaving the bathroom seemed to be an even worse idea, because as soon as he opened the door, his mother looked at his new form, and she passed out right then and there. Pulling her to the couch, he noticed that even when he used his quirk, because he didn't think that his feminine form wouldn't be capable since his body didn't have the mass for it, he was surprised that he was able to control the power more than he could beforehand. Pulling out his phone, he called his mentor and asked for him to bring Aizawa-sensei and Recovery Girl to his home so they could find out what in the world happened. Within minutes of his call for help, Izuku heard a knock on his door. As he opened it, as he was wearing a hoodie on his head, covering himself from his teachers. "Young Midoriya? I thought you were taller the last time I saw you. Are you keeping to the diet plan I had been informing you about?" All Might asked as he entered the home. Aizawa and Recovery Girl noticed the small flinch on the person's body as they followed the individual into their home. Problem child, I need to know what happened. And please show us why you aren't giving us a look at you. Aizawa asked, sternly as Izuku took OU. The hoodie. He got a range of reactions from his teachers, including Recovery Girl, who looked angry at Izuku. Did you go OU and get attacked with a quirk? She called out angrily. It was enough to get his mother to wake up from her self-induced passing out session that she had that morning. Izuku, can you tell me why your teachers are here and why you are a girl? Inko asked as Izuku looked at her. I don't know. All I remember after the mall incident was being patted on my lower back from someone who I didn't get a good look at. Then during the incident, my body felt weird and started to heat up. By the time I got home, I was so tired that I fell asleep. As soon as I got on my bed, Izuku said, slightly panicking, well, let's get you to UA in order to run some tests on your body. Can't have you getting spotted by some of your classmates like this. Now can we? Recovery Girl asked as Izuku made a comment. I have a field trip to the summer training camp today, Izuku said as Recovery Girl bit her lip. I think he'll be fine so long as his hormones don't get the better of him during camp. I can guarantee that the change we are experiencing is only the tip of the iceberg of what we will be experiencing in the future, Aizawa said as everyone nodded. I'll give them both a ride. You think you can do the ride for Recovery Girl, Aizawa? All Might asked as the man nodded. As soon as they all arrived at the school, Recovery Girl was having Izuku strp himself of all his clothes in order to see what else had happened to his body. She was surprised to find that he didn't have his male appendages anymore and that they were replaced with the feminine parts. Well, I can surmise that this was a sex change quirk accident. Did you get to see who the person was before they left? Recovery Girl asked. No, I couldn't see them as soon as they tapped my back. They were gone as soon as I turned around, Izuku said as he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Well, there goes that lead. Well, no matter, we should get you in the female school uniform. Can't having you walk around as if you're still a man, she said as Izuku looked at her like she was crazy. I can't go around in a girl's uniform. I'd die of embarrassment in that, Izuku said as the door opened up. Looking at the entrance of the door, they found a young man who looked eerily similar to Ochako, who had been looking at the situation with wide eyes before slamming the door shut. Sorry, the surprisingly familiar voice called out from behind the door. What did he scream about? Izuku asked as Recovery Girl gave him a look. That person saw you naked. Aren't you supposed to be guarding yourself more so now that you're a girl? The nurse asked as Izuku gained a blush. I think that was you, Araraka-san, though, Izuku mumbled as Recovery Girl stared at him with an exasperated smile. Well, get your uniform on. Can't have you continue your day at the training camp without your clothes, she said as Izuku put on a gym uniform. All right, dearie, you can come in, the old woman said as the new arrival came in. So I guess the same thing happened to you too, Deku-kun? The familiar voice asked, although much more manly as Kirishima would say. Uraraka-san, is that you? Izuku asked, concerned. Why, yup, got hit with the same thing as you, I guess. Although I remember that the person who nearly knocked me down had a brown hoodie over himself/herself. I don't know their identity yet, Ochako said, as they continued on their tests. As soon as their tests were done, Recovery Girl told them to leave her Weiss so she could do some research in peace and quiet, but not before telling Izuku to keep himself out of her Weiss. Both students arrived at their class, and they looked at one another as they understood that the other was nervous about how their classmates would react to how they look. Entering the room, they found that their classmates looked at them with shock, as well as concern, as they had been diurent people. Who are you? Ida asked as he walked over to the both of them. Ida-san, I am Midoriya Izuku, and that is Uraraka-san, Izuku said as the young man in front of them gawked at them both. How did you both become the opposite SEC? He called out as the girls and some guys were looking at them in even more shock. I guess the same person hit me and Uraraka-san with the same SEC change quirk, and we were given our opposite SEC forms. Although I wonder what kind of change occurs with the SXL change, Izuku said as he devolved into a muttering storm. Well, that's Midoriya-chan for you. So I guess what happened to him happened to you, Ochako-chan. So you asked as she walked over. Yeah, the same person got me and Deku, and we're going to try and get over our problems now about our SEC change. Don't worry, it won't stop us from training. Ochako said as she smiled at the group. Well, I guess that means that Uraraka is no longer up for grabs. And Midoriya is up for grabs in terms of relationship status. Zero said as he smiled sadly. What are you talking about? Uraraka-san and me aren't up for relationship status. Izuku said, getting out of his muttering storm. Oh, does that mean round face and you got together finally? Katsuki asked, glaring hard at Izuku. The young man looked over at Uraraka as she looked back at him, and as soon as they made up their mind, they nodded. Yes, ship Izucha has flown, Mina called out happily. It was here that Aizawa had told them all to get on the bus and get prepared to head out on their trip to where their summer training camp was going to begin. Once on the bus, Izuku and Ochako sat next to one another since they really needed to sell that they were together now. And Ochako began to speak to Izuku about their situation now that they are officially together. Okay, Deku-kun, we need to act like we're already lovey-dovey. How do you think we should do that? She asked as she looked him in his eyes. I don't know, but I guess we should just spend time together before the training starts and after it ends, Izuku asked, before feeling suddenly tired from the trip that he yawned. Leaning her head over Ochako's shoulder, she started to have their eyes flutter shut as they were falling asleep. Deku-kun, Ochako pleaded as Izuku had nearly fallen asleep, not before telling Ochako to do something else. Sikomi, Izuku, he said before passing out. The bus ride all the way to the summer training camp was underway, and Izuku had taken the time to sleep on Ochako's shoulder the entire time, although the rest of the class started to tease Ochako about it, unknown to the duo in love, but were oblivious to it. A young man with blonde hair and an attitude to match his quirk was glaring hatefully at Ochako. For a long time, Bakugo Katsuki had liked the nerd, even for all his faults. He just never got the chance to apologize for his actions against the boy. He just couldn't stomach up the pain and pride to just straight up apologize for his actions and just continue to be rude to him. The bus stopped as their teacher got the bus and told them to follow him outside and meet who they were going to be taught by. Izuku woke up by Ochako rubbing his head softly as he slowly woke up from his dream. Looking at the girl-turned man, he blushed as he sat upright as Ochako spoke to him. We've arrived at the spot. I wonder who we're going to be taught by, since we are in a forest. Ochako asked as both of them got the bus. Izuku was still wearing the gym uniform from their school, so he had no idea about what they were supposed to do after getting the bus. Their answers were given when they heard a few voices come from behind a blue car that showed up moments after they got the bus. Lock on with these sparkling daisies, stingingly cute and cat-like. Wild pussycats. Aizawa had lowered his head in complete disappointment as the two wild pussycats had appeared. All right, class, these two will be informing you about the training that will be starting real soon, Aizawa said as the first one moved up as Izuku gushed. Oh my gosh, that's Mandalay of the wild pussycats. They are one of the best rescue heroes out there that works exclusively as a team. They have been going on for 12-year dash, Izuku happily gushed as Ochako patted Izuku's back. I'm 18 at heart. Pixie Bob screamed at Izuku, pulling his cheeks. As soon as they introduced themselves as well as what the training was going to be, Izuku got a little worried as the pussycats told them that they'd have until noon in order to get to the campsite, and then toss them the Clias edge. With everyone moving through the forest in order to get to the campsite, they were accosted by mud creatures that attacked them at every which way. Izuku and the others took charge as they defeated each and every one of the creatures and moved on. This would continue for the next few hours or so as they moved throughout the forest in order to get to the campsite. By the time It was almost dinner time. The students of Class 1A had arrived, although there was some slight distancing from Izuku, and Katsuki, as the boy, was smugly looking at his hand whilst Izuku was shuddering. Izuku then noticed how there was a young boy looking angrily at the students as he kneeled down towards him as she introduced herself. "My name is Midoriya Izuku. What's your name?" Izuku asked, before the boy pulled his fist back, preparing to attack. Izuku got a slight buzz in her head as she dodged the attack as soon as it almost hit her, and she was completely surprised by that. Why did you try and attack me?" she asked, concerned. "Kota, you aren't supposed to attack our guests," Mandalay called out as the boy clicked his tongue before leaving. "I'm sorry about that, Midoriya. I hope that you don't take it out on him," Mandalay said, worriedly, as Izuku shook her head. "Don't worry. He's just got the same eyes I used to have. And I want to know what was on his mind. Why does he hate heroes, though?" Izuku asked as Mandalay sighed. "As much as I would love to tell you about it, how about you get back to your classmates?" Mandalay said as Izuku moved back. As the group of students looked at their mentors for the summer vacation that they were going through, the teacher spoke about their training and how they were going to immediately start the next morning. But at the same time, they wouldn't be able to cook for the students after that night, since they would be learning how to do that. Those who knew how to cook were the main ones who would be the cooks, whilst the other students were set to gathering ingredients for the cooks to use. "All right, class, we will begin our training in the morning. Be prepared for it," Aizawa said, with his trademark smile on his face. As soon as they all entered the building and set up their rooms, Aizawa had placed Izuku with the other girls and Uraraka with the girls, since they all knew Ochako. As Izuku was setting up her bed, she had noticed how she had been referring to herself in the female pronouns ever since the last few hours. She was probably too tired to even completely take once to it, though, as she made sure that she went asleep not too long after. The rest of the girls followed suit as Ochako had decided to sleep next to Izuku, as the two still needed to sell their relationship with one another. It was 3 in the morning when Ochako had woken up to get a drink of water. She had been feeling like something was wrong that morning since she was the first to wake up, and as soon as she returned to the bedroom where the girls were located, she found the reason why she was feeling was wrong. She found Izuku moving about her sleep as she was struggling to keep her voice quiet as she and shivered. Ochako decided to sit down next to the sleeping Izuku as he started to pet the girl's hair as he continued to try and calm the sleeping girl. "Why am I referring to myself in a male's pronouns?" Ochako thought to themselves. Gasp! Ochako looked over to find Izuku holding her admittedly large chest as she took deep breaths in order to collect themselves. "Hey, are you okay?" Ochako asked as Izuku finally noticed her presence in front of her. Sorry if I woke you up," Izuku said, looking at the ground. "Hey, don't worry, I woke up before you did. I came back only to see that you had a nightmare from what looked like," Ochako said, as Izuku pulled her legs up to her chest, unknowingly showing her panties, as Ochako kept the sight to himself as he mentally made a comment about the choice. "All my panties. I just still can't wrap my head around the fact that everyone is so kind to me," Izuku said, as she curled in deeper into her little ball. "Why would you think that, Deku-kun?" Ochako asked, as Izuku looked at him. "I never really liked the nickname of Deku. Whenever someone calls me by that name, it made me feel like I'm useless. Even though I made it my hero name, I think I should change it. I would rather not be called useless hero," Izuku said, as Ochako thought about it. "It does make it seem like Deku-kun, no? Midoriya won't be a good hero, especially since Deku means useless puppet. Don't worry, Midori, I will make sure that you're feeling much better about yourself," Ochako thought to himself with a promise. Ochako went to lay back down on the bed as he pulled Izuku into his broad chest, as Izuku's face became a blushing mess. "Hey, don't worry about those nightmares anymore. I will make sure that my presence with you will chase them. Oh, you are one of the greatest heroes that I've ever met, Ochako said, as Izuku pushed her face into his chest. It was about 2 hours later when Aizawa and the Pussycats had woken up the girls and boys of both Class 1A and 1B as they met their teachers and mentors in the yard. Izuku was looking like she had more energy to spare since she had gotten to calm herself down more from earlier that morning. All right, class. Most of you are going to do some exercises that will increase the power of your quirk and use that to increase your newfound control of it. Now, Bakugo, you got 705.2 meters on the first day of class when you did the ball throw. Now try it again, Aizawa said as Bakugo moved forward and grabbed the ball and used an explosion-powered throw on it. It went significantly further than it had the last time he threw it, but it wasn't by much as soon as the robot had given the meter range. 708.4 meters. The robotic voice called out as Bakugo was now furious. Only a few meters? I thought that quirks got stronger the more we used them. Bakugo screeched out. They do, but you have only done small amounts of training before we were attacked by villains in the USJ and being found at the Kiyashi shopping ward, Aizawa said, as the group nodded. So what are our training regiments? Momo asked, curious. Well, those of you with strength-enhancing quirks will be training with Tiger in order to increase your strength. And, for one of you, increasing your control for what you can handle. Can you show us how much you can use Midoriya? Aizawa asked as Izuku moved forward, channeling her power of one for all in her body and spreading it throughout the body. Izuku noticed how much easier it was to use the power, especially since her body structure was changed and her crooked hands were replaced with soft ones instead. It was as if her entire skeletal structure was changed to better suit her quirk's usage as well as power. Aizawa-sensei, I can perfectly use 20% maximum without even being hurt, Izuku said, as Aizawa looked at Izuku confusedly. How much could you use without hurting yourself beforehand? Aizawa asked. About 5%, before the body change. Izuku said, pale. Well then, we will have to try and get that up to 30% by the time this training camp is over, Aizawa said, as Izuku gained a white expression, as if she had lost all the color in the world. This is plus ultra, Aizawa said, smiling evilly at his students. The hours started to stack up on the students as they trained their quirks to the utmost limit, as Izuku was seen screaming as she attacked Tiger with as much power as she could handle. For what Tiger had told her, the amount of power used at max will increase the amount she would be capable of using further on as a student. And by the time they were done training for the summer, he wanted her to be capable of using at least 40% of her quirk without hurting herself, while pushing it to 45% if needed. The training of the other students looked as though it was working as Momo ate a bunch of food in order to create her items as well as spam them until she was exhausted in terms of quirk usage. Pretty much all the students were pushing themselves to the far limits of their quirk use before the time hit around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Once that happened, their training for the day ended as they started to make dinner, and the class were surprised that Bakugo and Izuku knew how to cook. Izuku admittedly knew how to make every single dish that her mother had made for her ever since she started eating her new diet, whilst Bakugo knew how to make extremely spicy foods. That night, though, Izuku demanded that they made katsudon since she was craving it for some reason. Izuku was blinking at how she was being assertive in the situation before feeling something trickle down her leg before running Oyu. Ochako followed after Izuku with some of the other girls as they soon found Izuku in the bathroom looking at her legs and having a mental breakdown. Oh, Kakikin, what is going on with my body? Am I dying? Izuku called out, looking at the girl-turned man with a very scared look on her face. Don't worry, Midori. That's just your first PRD. I didn't think that being changed into a girl would make you sue or what we do, Mina said as Izuku finally noticed the other girls in the room. Whilst that was happening, Bakugo was looking in shock as he noticed that Izuku was going through something that most women do, and he couldn't help but think about what she would be like underneath him. But he shook his head as the thought was outrageous for him to think about, and he knew that he needed to fix his relationship with Izuku before he could even start dating him. Blush adorning his face, he continued to make his spicy curry as he wanted to make one for Izuku specifically. Maybe that would allow him to show round Face's place and have Deku finally look at him again. As the girls and Ochako returned back to the picnic table, Katsuki gave Izuku some spicy curry as Izuku started to dig into it. T, thanks Kakin. B, but I wanted Katsudan, Izuku said, pouting as Katsuki looked at her angrily. Cowing her newfound confidence, Izuku went back to eating the spicy curry as Katsuki growled out an answer for her. We'll have Katsudan tomorrow. Before he left the girls as they looked like Izuku just tamed the worst kind of animal in the universe. Ochako, though, was looking at the boy with scrutiny as he looked back at the girl-turned-boy with a sick smile. As the girls Izuku and Ochako started eating their dinner, they had made comments about Bakugo's behavior and how Izuku should stay away from him. Why should I stay away from Kakin? He's not that bad, I promise, Izuku said as the girls and Ochako looked at Izuku with a deadpan expression. What? Izuku asked as someone spoke up. When I heard that you were on your PRD, Bakugo looked in your direction with a slight blush on his face as well as a smile. It was as creepy as Mineta's smiles, though, Todoroki said as he walked by eating his own food. Izuku looked over at Katsuki as the young man noticed the look and smirked at Izuku, but as Katsuki thought that Izuku was going to smile back at him like he planned, Izuku shuddered and looked away, looking green. The night continued as Izuku was about to enter the boys' bathroom when someone grabbed his shoulder. Midori, what are you doing? Mina asked as she looked at the young man-turned-girl with a worried look. What are you talking about? I'm going to take a bath, Izuku asked as Mina looked at him with a worried look. That's the perfect way for Mineta and Bakugo to get you to do something that you don't want to do, Mina said as she pulled Izuku over to the girls' bath. But what about the fact that I'm still a boy inside? Izuku called out as Mina looked at him. Well, you're a girl on the outside, and you wouldn't want Bakugo and Mineta to do anything to you as you're trying to take a bath, right? Mina asked as Izuku went into a muttering spree as Ochako had entered the women's bath. As Ochako entered the room, all the girls had looked over at the girl-turned-boy as Ochako looked at them oddly. What's wrong? Ochako asked as the girls nodded and started to push Ochako out. Why can't Ochako come with us? Izuku asked as the girls pointed at Ochako's tent. I am fine with it, Izuku said, nervously and blushing. As the girls sighed in exasperation, they allowed Ochako to stay with them as they thought that it would change soon. When Ochako and Izuku sat next to one another, Izuku noticed how the girls were staying far away from Ochako since the young girl-turned-man was only looking at Izuku. Any reason the girls are hiding their modesty from you? I mean, you've already seen them naked as a girl, Izuku said as Ochako chuckled. They have a hard time reacting to a girl turned into a guy. Looking at them, it's a privacy thing. Why aren't you worried about your chastity? Ochako asked as Izuku looked at him. What do you mean by that? Chastity? Izuku asked Ochako. Ochako then went on an entire tirade about how Izuku should be guarding his new body at all times, especially from Ochako, since she will be sewering from the male equivalent of periods. Except all the time. If you're talking about the erections that men get, I've never gotten one before, Izuku said as Ochako looked a little saddened. Not even when you saw me in my hero costume, Ochako asked suddenly as Izuku blushed. Well, I meant before UA, Izuku said, looking away. How big is your chest, by the way, Izuku? Ochako asked as Izuku placed her hand on her chest to see. I don't know. For what I know, it's big enough to make the shirts. I have to be lifted somewhat, and seem like you could see them from below the shirt if you look. Hard enough, Izuku said, as she was about to show Ochako her chest. Can you measure them? Izuku asked, as he found a small measuring tape nearby. Ochako gulped as he started to place the tape around Izuku's body and chest as they sat at the sinks and wash cups. As soon as Ochako pushed the tape around the front of Izuku's chest, the young man turned girlwise, watching on in awe as Ochako did this expertly. Ochako's face, though, was blushing horribly as he felt something rise within his towel that he wore over his lower body. As soon as the measurements were done, Ochako pulled the tape away as he said the bust number. You are at least 104 centimeters for your bust, Ochako said, as Izuku tried to remember how big that was. How big is that, Ochako? Izuku asked as the young man looked at Izuku with a slightly fearful look. Why, you'd be almost as big as Mina and Momo. That being D cups, Ochako said as Izuku placed a hand on them experimentally. I guess I should get a sports BR then. I wouldn't wish to have been itchy during training, Izuku mumbled to herself, as the girls in the room watched as the duo mumbled to one another. Mina gained an idea that she thought would be perfect. Hey girls, I think we need to make sure Midori gets some pills. Mina smirked to the other girls. As soon as the students were about to leave the hot springs, they found that Kota, the small boy who had tried to hit Midoriya in the chest from his little height, had fallen the ledge on the boys' side. When they heard the commotion on the other side of the hot springs on the boys' end, Izuku decided that then and there she would get to the bottom of why the boy hated heroes and villains. When she left the bathrooms, she found that Kirishima was bringing the boy out of the boys' bathroom area. Hey, I can bring Kota over to Mandalay for you, Izuku said as the boy smiled at her. All right, just don't go too HRD on yourself. You're adjusting to your new body right now. Can't have you getting in trouble now, the boy said as Izuku chuckled at his demeanor. As soon as she left the bathroom area of the cottage, she found herself in the living room of the Pussycat's home as she was in a conversation with Mandalay about the death of the water hose duo, who just so happened to be Kota's parents. I can't believe that he had to endure the pain of losing his parents like that. I know that I wouldn't have lasted as long as he did if I lost my parents the way he did, Izuku said as Mandalay looked at Izuku with concern. What do you mean by that, Midoriya? Mandalay asked as Izuku clammed her mouth shut. In nothing. I am going to bed, Izuku said, running OU. Wait, Midoriya, Mandalay called out as she sat on her couch, remembering the face Izuku made. What happened to make her that scared? Mandalay thought to herself. As Izuku ran back to the girl's bedroom, she laid herself down on her cot as she trembled slightly on it. She had no idea why she said that to Mandalay. Of all people, she was really close to telling Mandalay about her past as a quirkless individual who had it far worse than the young Kota. Although she didn't lose her parents when she was little, it still hurt her that her parents still weren't as happy with her decision to become a hero, despite their best efforts to curb this ideal. As Izuku was asleep in her cot, she never felt how Ochako had been sleeping behind her the whole time as he unconsciously placed an arm around her body. But unknown to either one of them, someone was awake to see this moment and take a picture of their sleeping forms before heading to sleep themselves. It was around 3 in the morning when Izuku was having a nightmare, and it was when she used to be both male and around 13 years of age back in Alder Middle School. Izuku was walking through the halls of the place as she had been taking in every single memory that she could remember. She was like a ghost in this memory as she watched her male counterpart of the memory enter the classroom in a hurry. She watched on as everyone bullied him mentally, as well as when the hero career forms were stated, how Katsuki launched himself at her male form's desk, scaring him half to death. As her male counterpart had fallen to the ground, she watched as the fear in his eyes at Kakin as the young man started to bully him. even harsher than the others as his mental manipulation continued further. Izuku had always known that Katsuki hated the fact that Izuku had spouted the fact that she'd become a hero without a quirk, but never really put in the effort of actually training her body to become one. At the time, nobody would allow her to join their dojo in order to have something to fall upon in terms of fighting styles. Now that she has one for all, though, she couldn't help but think that her dreams of becoming a quirkless hero had died the moment she had been gifted one for all. Why am I thinking about that day? All Might said that it was impossible to become a hero without a quirk. But now that I think about it, when he told me that I could be a hero, he never told me that it was not impossible to become one without a quirk like he told me on the roof. It pretty much confirmed that my dreams of becoming a hero without a power was just that. A dream. Dream, Izuku thought to herself. A stray tear came down Izuku's face as she slept in Ochako's arms as she burrowed herself deeper into his contact as she let out a couple snarls. It wasn't loud enough to wake up anyone else in the room, but it was enough to wake up Ochako, who had felt warm all of a sudden and had water being drenched into his pajamas. Groggily, waking himself up, he looked at the time on his phone to see that it was 3 o'clock in the morning, before leaving the room to get some water. Why does this night feel similar to the other night? Ochako thought to himself as he returned to the bed and wrapped his arms around Izuku. It was subconscious at this point as he pulled her in and smelled her hair, and he was surprised it smelled like strawberries. He then noticed the near inaudible snarl coming from Izuku as he looked down to see tears streaming down her eyes as she slept. She's crying while she's asleep. What's going on in her dream? Ochako thought to himself, pulling Izuku in as hard into his chest as possible. Ochako made sure that he whispered into Izuku's ear that he was here for her. Within Izuku's nightmare, we find ourselves on the rooftop where Izuku was rejected by all might before his change of answer. I'm sorry, but without a power of your own, you can't become a hero. I couldn't live with myself if you went out to become a hero of your own without a power and died in the field where someone with a more useful quirk could be used. Izuku was now staring OU into the distance on the rooftop as she thought about everything that happened in her life up until this point. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. Hey, you're defenseless and useless? How about you combine both defenseless and Izuku? And what do you get? Defenseless Izuku. Your new nickname is Deku. You're even more useless than these extras. You're quirkless. If you want to be a hero so much, I have a way you could become one. If you go to the roof of a building, you might become a hero in your next life by jumping OU of it. I can't believe that. You're that crazy to enter a hostage situation without a quirk. That was completely reckless. Death Arm scolded a frowning Izuku. As much as I admire your bravery, kid, you can't just go out and become a hero without a quirk. It's too dangerous for you. Kamui Woods stated softly. I can't believe that you did that without a quirk. But we had the situation covered, young man. You can't just go out into danger and just expect that things will go out the way you think. MT Lady said angrily. Young man, you are more of a hero than every one of us heroes on the scene. I came here to inform you of an apology for me to give to you, as well as a suggestion. You too can become a hero. I deem you worthy of my power. All Might states sadly. All I ever wanted was to become a hero like you, All Might. Just why can't I become what I wish without a superpower? Izuku thought to herself as she let her tears flow. Izuku, are you all right? Ochako asked as Izuku slowly woke up staring at the ceiling. Looking over at the young man, Izuku pulled herself into Ochako's hug as she cried on the young man's shoulder. Unfortunately for the duo, everyone else woke up at the sound of Izuku crying in Ochako's arms as they looked at the scene with their hearts breaking. Ochako-chan, what happened? Tsu asked, looking guarded. I don't know. Izuku was sleeping whilst crying. I try to make her feel better, but I don't know why she won't answer me. Ochako said, looking at the still, shaking form of Izuku. Maybe it's something us girls should talk about without your presence here? Momo asked as Izuku violently shook her head. No, I don't want him to be separated from me. Izuku said, holding Ochako harder. I don't want to lose my first best friend. Izuku said, as everyone looked alarmed. What do you mean, first best friend? Jiro asked, concerned. My childhood wasn't as good as everyone else's, Izuku said, as she pulled away from Ochako's shoulder softly, regretting doing so in the process, as she informed them all about her past, growing up as well as everything leading up to the entrance exams. You're telling us that you went into the entrance exams of UA without a quirk and not thinking you had one to begin with? Momo asked, concerned. Ochako was now hugging Izuku close to himself as he heard the history of Izuku and Bakugo, now wanting nothing more than to keep the young girl who was a boy at first away from Bakugo's clutches. It wouldn't be rude of you to burn your bridges with Bakugo now, would it? You gave him 10 years' worth of chances to stop what he did. Mina asked as she looked at Izuku. As much as I would like to burn my bridges with Keikaken, I can't. He was my symbol of victory, growing up. I know he can become a hero. He just needs to see you curb his attitude. Izuku mumbled as she hid herself in Ochako's chest. As soon as the other girls were about to ask Izuku about what truly happened on the day, she met All Might for the first time. The door received a knock. Girls in Uraraka, you better get outside in the next 5 minutes before I have Pixie Bob enter here and drag you all out. Aizawa droned from the other side of the door. This caused everyone to sober up really quickly as they got changed into their other clothes, and Ochako couldn't help but look at Izuku's body as she changed into her workout clothes the entire time. Once the students were outside, Aizawa told them about their training regimen again as they moved to their specific locations once again. He did not ignore the fact that all the girls in Uraraka were glaring in hatred at Bakugo for some reason, but he would make sure that he was informed for their reason for looking at the student. Like that, their training was the same as the last time, as Izuku had managed to gain control of that. At least 29% of one for all before the end of the day as they were making dinner for themselves. When Izuku had noticed where Koda had been disappearing to the previous nights, she decided to bring him some dinner that she was the cook for, and as soon as she got some cold soba set up and prepared, she left the table and brought it to where she believed the young boy to be located at. Within the next few minutes of walking through the forest and arriving at a Clio face, Izuku smiled to herself for a job well done. As she saw the feet dangling over the edge of the Clio, she soon turned around the corner and saw that Koda was overlooking the forest that his guardian had control over. Hey, Koda-chan, I came with some dinner for you, Izuku said as she smiled at the boy. What do you want? I don't want you to be here, Koda said as he angrily looked at Izuku. I'm sorry for not saying this earlier, but I wanted to make sure that you were okay. I know about what happened to your parents, Izuku said softly as the boy got ready to tell her OU when he was given the food. I'm not going to tell you that your parents' death was okay. That isn't right. But what isn't right is everyone celebrating their death as if it was a holiday. You are experiencing what nobody should at a very young age. I know that I wouldn't last a day if I didn't have the quirk that I have and lost my parents at your age, Izuku said as Koda looked at Izuku. What do you mean by that? He asked, confused. I was quirkless before I gained my quirk. Do you want to know how bad it is for us quirkless individuals out there against everyone who has one? Izuku asked as Koda looked at Izuku with a confused and curious expression. What is it easier for you? Koda asked, grumbling. It isn't as good as everyone makes it out to be. There are a few people in my life who think that being quirkless is a good thing in our current society. But the problem therein lies. Those of us who are quirkless are treated as worse than second-class citizens. We are treated as less than pets and animals. We are treated as if we are not a part of evolution, and that we should be exterminated. That was my life growing up, everyone hating my existence. running through the streets in order to escape bullies, and having to escape those who wish to kill me on the daily since I'm not like them. Izuku said, looking at the sky. What did you last as long as you did then? Koda asked, as Izuku looked over. I didn't. This is all a dream to me right now, and it feels as if I can't become a hero without a quirk. I had a realization last night that really hit me hard, and in my heart, my idol All Might had told me that being a quirkless hero was impossible, and when I gained my quirk, it still feels like that. My dream of becoming the world's first quirkless hero died on the day that All Might told me becoming a quirkless hero, who is similar to how he acts, is impossible, Izuku said, holding a fist on her shirt over her chest. I spent my night of learning that I could become a hero with All Might's training, thinking about what my quirk was supposed to be, only to get it on the day of the entrance exams. Izuku said as Koda looked alarmed. You didn't have a quirk for 14 years of your life, he called, out concerned. Nope, but that just means that no matter what happens, you should just make sure that you can become whatever you wish to become. Be that a hero, a villain, a vigilante, a baker, a martial artist, or others. My dream of becoming a hero is coming true right now, and I couldn't be any happier. But if a quirkless child asks me in the future if they could become a hero like me without a quirk, I would tell them that I believe in them, and just to stay safe, Izuku said before standing up. Izuku left Koda sitting on the ledge, thinking about everything that Izuku spoke about heroes and villains, and gained a determined expression before he took a bite of the food. SHD. That's good, he said, before we moved back to our protagonist. She arrived back at the campsite as she saw her classmates preparing for something big happening that night. What's going on? Izuku asked as Mina spoke up. We're doing a test of courage, and the one leading the charge will be you all by yourself. Mina said happily. Okay, where do I begin? Izuku asked before being shown the way to the front of the line. Make sure to not get scared too easily, Ochako said, giggling. I'll try, Izuku said before entering the forest. She only made it about 50 meters through the forest before noticing a stench of burning wood and became alarmed as she ran through the forest. As soon as she got to a certain area, she found blue flames burning the forest nearby as she immediately went to the last location of where she found Koda. She had run into Mandalay of the Pussycats, who was fighting two villains who were attacking them. Mandalay, I'm going after Koda. I know where he is, Izuku said as Mandalay went to stop her before it was too late. Izuku had taken OU as soon as she informed the Pussycat leader, as the woman grumbled about Aizawa being right about problem children. Izuku had arrived at the edge of the Clio face as she heard movement above as she ran as fast as she could at 29% power. She was exhilarated with the amount of power she could control at the moment as she found Koda looking fearfully at the man in front of him. Can you tell me where I can find my target? The man asked as Koda looked at him fearfully. Koda, Izuku called out as the boy looked over at her. Get behind me. Who are you, kid? No matter. I'm supposed to go after a boy who has an explosion quirk and bring him in. But who cares about him? I just want a good kill, the man said as he took OU's cloak. He then revealed himself as the S-class villain. Muscular, the murderer of the water hose duo. He's the one who killed my parents. Koda trembled as tears were brimming to the surface. Oh, you're the water hose duo's brat? Like parents like son. I can't wait to bring you to their living now, the man said before he started to increase his muscle fibers around his body. Izuku took the chance of him being distracted and kicked the man with 29% power in the face, sending the villain flying backwards as he landed in the mountain behind himself. Izuku knew that she wouldn't be capable of winning the fight as she managed to grab Koda and run OU. But as soon as she jumped OU the Clio into the forest, she heard the rage-filled screams of her opponent, who jumped after her in a fury. I need to inform Aizawa-sensei about this villain's presence. Not only that, but the fact that Kaken's being Targeted, Izuku said as she ran. Over in the other side of the forest, Momo in the other. Students were dealing with villains of their own as they needed to keep their distance from them. It seemed as if this attack was planned, and Momo was going to do everything in her power just to make sure that they could stop their plans. She had placed a tracker on the Nomo, with the chainsaws as it changed targets halfway into the attack and left her Kendo and Tetsu against a young man who could create toxic gas. Kendo and Tetsu took some gas masks in order to charge into the gas and take out the person inside. As they were taking down that villain, Katsuki and Shoto were all on their own as they were taking on a villain who could send his teeth out and regrow them almost instantly whenever they were destroyed. Everyone around the forest were fighting for their lives as they were keeping the fighting to a minimum as they were doing their very best to stay alive during this kind of event. Within the last few minutes within the start of the attack, everyone gained a new order from their teacher as well as Mandalay. Class 1A and B. Aizawa Shota, no Eraserhead of Class 1A, authorizes the usage of your quirks in self-defense. Do not kill anyone. Mandalay called out, using her quirk. About 4 minutes earlier, Izuku was seen speeding through the forest as she was trying to find her teacher, Aizawa Shota. It wasn't that hard to find him since he had taken down a villain who had turned into slop. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku called out, alerting the man of her presence. Midoriya, what's going on? Aizawa asked, as Izuku explained everything. There's a villain attack, and they're after Bakugo. I just saved Kota from Muscular. You need to stop him. He's on his way over here, Izuku said, as just as she finished those words, the man showed up. For the last time, pissant. I want to spill some BLD. Muscular called out as Aizawa stepped in front of his student. Get to the building. Vlad King is there, and he will protect you. All, Aizawa said, as Izuku nodded, and just before she left, he gave her a message. Make sure to let Mandalay give the order to all students in the forest that Aizawa Shota has allowed the usage of quirks in self-defense. Shota said, as Izuku ran OU, leaving Aizawa to Muscular. So, you're an underground hero, huh? What's your quirk? Muscular asked, as Aizawa placed his goggles on as he activated his quirk. Muscular had started to try and use his quirk when he noticed that he couldn't use it. Looking at the man closing in on him, the villain couldn't help but laugh at his situation. Wallaby, you can nullify my quirk. I can't wait to add your name to the number of heroes I've killed. Muscular called out, running towards Aizawa. Nobody heard the screams of Muscular that night. On the way over to the cottage where the summer camp was taking place at, Izuku found Mandalay in the forest, helping her allies hold OU the villains. Mandalay, Izuku called out as the woman looked over. What are you doing, Kota? Mandalay called out, running over. Aizawa-sensei left a message for Class 1A and B for you to telegraph to everyone. Izuku said as Mandalay nodded her head. Tell them that Aizawa Shota gives Class 1A and B express control to use their quirks to defend themselves and to not kill anyone. Izuku said as Mandalay nodded and relayed the message. Anything else? She asked as Izuku nodded. Tell them that Bakugo Katsuki is being targeted by the villains, Izuku said as she ran OU to find the said boy. After dropping Kota OU at the cottage, Izuku ran OU into the forest in order to find Katsuki, and she was met with Shoji grabbing her before a giant shadow claw nearly cleaved her in two. Thanks, Shoji-san, Izuku said as the man nodded. We need to get either Bakugo-kin or Todoroki-kun to use their quirks in order to calm Dark Shadow down. Do you have a plan to get them here? Shoji asked as Izuku nodded. We bring Dark Shadow to them. Did you see them earlier? Izuku asked as the student nodded his head and pointed towards further in the forest. Nodding their heads at one another, they both ran out and gained the giant sentient shadow's attention. It worked, and they ran straight into the forest as they led around the shadow as it defeated some Nomus in the area. When they found Katsuki and Shoto, the boys, noticed the quite large shadow that descended upon the villain as it was defeated by it. "Feed me, poor people," the shadow screeched. Gonna have to need you both to use flashbang in order to get Dark Shadow to calm down," Izuku said as Katsuki realized the reference. "I'm not a Pokemon," Katsuki yelled out as the shadow descended upon them. "More people to feast on," Dark Shadow screeched out as both Katsuki and Todoroki released a blast of their quirks, causing Tokoyami and Dark Shadow to screech in slight pain. It wasn't much longer before Tokoyami regained control over the sentient shadow as he breathed heavily. "That was close. I apologize for losing control over her," the young man said, as everyone nodded. Everyone moved throughout the forest as they told Bakugo about how he was being targeted by the villains. They arrived at an open clearing as they found Fu and Ochako fighting a female villain who was trying to steal BLD from both of them. As soon as Izuku appeared in the area, she started to blush at Izuku as she ran towards her. "I knew that you'd be pretty, but I didn't know that you'd look pretty without BLD," the girl said, swinging a blade at Izuku, who dodged the attack. "What the hell is wrong with her?" Izuku screamed in her head as she dodged the strikes of the villainess. She seemingly got orders to leave as she pouted and jumped away from Izuku as the girl was about to kick her away. As she ran, Izuku couldn't help but notice how the girl mouthed, "Look behind you." And as soon as the girl disappeared, Izuku turned to look where Katsuki was supposed to be, only to not see him at all. "Where's Kakin?" Izuku screamed as she looked around, and as everyone noticed a man in the trees. Fleeing, Izuku took OU after the man. As she got as close as she could to the man, he tossed out some marbles, and as they opened up, they revealed ice shelves from Todoroki's attacks. She dodged the attacks from the man as she changed her trajectory as she ran along the ground as she made her way over to him from below. It wasn't much longer before a stray light beam of energy came from a nearby bush that smashed into the man's mask, causing him to cough up some marbles from his mouth. Shoji had caught one marble as they had noticed during their chase that Tokoyami wasn't anywhere with him as well. And as soon as Izuku reached out to grab the other marble, a scarred hand reached out to grab it, and as he tried to release some flames in order to cause Izuku to run, she took the brunt of the flames and grabbed the marble. The man smirked as Izuku jumped back as the scarred male smirked at her. "Release the power on that marble compress," the man said as the other man nodded. As soon as the marble in Izuku's hand broke apart, Izuku noticed that it was a spare knife, and as she looked over at the villains, she found the marble holding Katsuki underneath the tongue of compress. He tossed it over to the scarred villain as the quirk deactivated as Izuku ran over to save her old friend turned bully. "Kakin!" Izuku screamed as she jumped towards him as the villains and Bakugo were leaving through a portal. "Don't come, Deku," the boy said as he disappeared from the forest. Sitting on the ground, Izuku stared at the spot where her ex-friend was standing in shock as well as sadness. I couldn't save him," Izuku said as she went catatonic. As the other students arrived in the area, they heard from the other students nearby that Katsuki Bakugo was kidnapped by the villains. As the other students attempted to get Izuku to return from her catatonic state, they were suddenly alarmed by how she suddenly screamed out all her frustrations. "Jaiwa!" The sudden shockwave from her scream caused everyone to notice how her quirk activated as she suddenly appeared at the rock face, as if she was there the whole time as she began to punch the rocks as hard as she could. The sounds of rocks breaking as well as horrible crunching sounds coming from Izuku's hands were all that could be heard when Aizawa appeared and canceled Izuku's quirk. "What just happened? Why did Midoriya scream like that?" Aizawa asked, concerned for his student. "Bakugo got kidnapped by villains, sir. After he disappeared from view, Izuku just broke," Momo said as she watched as Izuku punched the rocks without a quirk. They were still surprised by how many Punches Izuku was still throwing as she caused some of the much smaller and weaker rocks to crack under the number of punches she was using. Midoriya, stand down, Aizawa said before. He suddenly heard something wrong with Midoriya. Hee hee. Ha 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 ha. Izuku laughed, hysterically. Did she finally lose her sanity from Bakugo being kidnapped? Mina asked, confused. Midoriya, what is wrong? Aizawa asked, as he approached the girl with a look full of concern as well as slight fear. Oh, of all the students. Huh. Oh, out of all the S students the villains took. Ha ha. They took the one who never wishes to be a villain. Izuku started to laugh maniacally. What are you talking about? Aizawa asked, as Izuku looked at him, and the tears coming from Izuku's face was evident that she didn't feel like she wanted to laugh. The villains would have had an even better time turning me to their cause. Izuku said before all the information about her hands, as well as everything that happened in the day, caught up with her mind as she passed out collapsing onto the ground. As soon as Aizawa had caught Izuku's body from hitting the ground harder than it would have if she sat down, he looked over to the other students and asked the one question that was on his mind. All right, girls, you will tell me why. Midoriya thinks that she would be a better villain than Bakugo, Aizawa said as everyone moved away from the area. The fact that villains had attacked a UA facility once again had the news in a riot. The people had placed their trust in the heroes, and they had failed their students once again. The media were tearing into the heroes, even harsher than they did the first time this happened at the USJ, and they were demanding answers. The Pussycat's home in the woods was supposed to be secret information, and the simple fact that the League of Villains had found it was more telling about someone telling them about it from the inside. It was later in that afternoon that Nizu would make an announcement, where he would talk about what happened that day, as well as what happened or will happen to those villains who attacked them. In the hospital class 1, they were talking to one another about who would go out to save Bakugo, and Kirishima was one of the few who planned on going to save the boy. We find the boy heading to Izuku's room in order to try and recruit her to help them save the boy, the one who used to be Izuku's bully, from the villains that took him away. As the door to Izuku's room opened, the girl looked at Kirishima as she looked away from him as she immediately knew what he was going to ask. Mito bro, we need your help in saving Bakugo from the villains. Without your on-the-spot thinking, we can't save him fast enough, Kirishima said as he pleaded his case. Kirishima, I could get in even more trouble than I currently am if I went with you. I know that you're friends with him. I support it myself, but I don't think I can help you after all he did to me in the past. I can't look at him anymore without thinking about what he's done, Izuku said, as Kirishima looked at Izuku. So you won't even try to help save him from the villains? I thought you stood by his side more so than anyone else. Kirishima asked, seemingly owl-ended. What? You think I should stand by his side now of all times? I have stayed by his side for 10 whole years, and look where it's gotten me, Kirishima. I'm mentally unstable. I don't have any kind of self-preservation, all because of the mental anguish he gave me for over 10 years. I had given him the benefit of the doubt for 10 years. Kirishima, I know that. You want my help to save him. I don't even know that if I see him again, if I could even keep myself from punching him in the face again. But the simple fact that he needs my help right now. Most of all, he wouldn't want me to be nearby, Izuku said as she slumped to the bed. What do? You mean he wouldn't want you nearby? Kirishima asked as Izuku looked pointedly at him. Why do you think he keeps you around? Izuku asked as the young man thought about it. Well, I guess he could think of me as a friend. But that does that have to do with anything? Kirishima asked. I had been friend with him since I was 4 years old, and he had done nothing but abuse me, bully me, and mentally abuse me for 10 whole years ever since I was announced. Quirkless, Izuku said, as Kirishima looked at Izuku with a concerned look. I know that this sounds like it's bullshit, but if you ask him, listen to what he will tell you if you ask him one. Singular. Question. Ask him if a quirkless person can become a hero, then come back to me later. But for your answer about helping you save Bakugo, I will help, but right now I need some sleep, Izuku said, as she shook her head before lying back down. Kirishima had left the room, with a new look on his face as he looked at the other students who watched him talk to Izuku. I guess nobody was supposed to hear that, he asked, as Midnight looked at him pointedly. I know that you wish to help save Bakugo-san, but you really need to leave this to the pros, Midnight said, patting the boy's sharp head as she left. As he looked at his classmates, they looked at him like he was crazy for his plans of saving the explosive boy. Don't look at me as the president of the class. Want to implore you to not do this, Kirishima. If you continue to do this, it could get you killed, Ida said, as he stared into the hardening quirk user's eyes. I know this, but it's all worth it if we can get him away whilst the heroes take care of the villains, Kirishima said, as he informed everyone about how he got Yaoyorozu in on the plan. A few minutes later, Kirishima waited outside as he had Momo standing next to him with a locator on her wrist as they waited for Izuku to arrive. What they got instead was Tenya as well as Shoto arriving in order to help them out with their mission to save the explosive boy. As soon as they were prepared to leave Izuku behind, they heard Izuku shulling around nearby. Looking behind themselves as they looked down the road, they found the girl looking at the sky, tears in her eyes. I can't believe that Kaken got himself kidnapped. And he said he was going to be the #1 hero. I don't even care for the title. I just wish to save people. And unfortunately, he counts as people no matter how much I hate it, Izuku said, looking at the smiling face of Kirishima. You came, Kirishima said, happily. Just be sure to know that if Kaken gets himself kidnapped again, I will not, and I mean absolutely will not help in his rescue again. If he gets himself kidnapped again, he's on his own, Izuku said, as Kirishima looked confused. What do you mean by those words? Tenya asked, concerned. I've had enough of Kaken being in my life and ruining it for me. This will be the last time I help him. I extended an olive branch for 10 whole years in order for him to change his decisions of the past. I won't be doing it again after this. Once this is done, I want nothing to do with Katsuki Bakugo for the rest of my life, Izuku said, as she took the locator from Momo and led the group into Kamino Ward. As the group moved about the area, Kirishima was thinking about everything that had happened in the hospital as he talked with Izuku as she was still reeling from the fact she couldn't save Katsuki. I don't have any kind of self-preservation, all because of the mental anguish he gave me for over 10 years. I wonder what counts as mental anguish for Midoriya for the simple mentioning of not helping Baku bro, for her to enter a panic attack like that. Not only that, but he was her bully back when they were kids. Kirishima thought to himself as they arrived at the location. They looked over the wall they were under and found a massive warehouse that was dark in color and was more intimidating than it should have been. They were in the middle of making their plan to save Bakugo when they heard a massive explosion as well as felt the massive aura of the villain who caused said explosion. Izuku's face, though, was what really sold the situation as her eyes were pinpricks as well as her breathing was short and ragged as she couldn't handle the feeling of the pressure coming from the villain as he spoke. To think that these low-tier heroes thought that they could get the upper hand over me. He's late as well. Good. I will call Tamura's league. Over here with the young Bakugo in tow. That should sue us. The voice spoke with complete elation. Izuku was looking as if she was sewering from a nightmare in her real life, as she kept muttering a name that none of them could hear or understand from how fast she was saying it. But for what Tenya could hear, it sounded like all for one. But as soon as they were about to continue making their plans, they noticed how there was a distinct smell of burnt sugar as well as caramel. Looking over the wall, they found Katsuki Bakugo facing OU against the villains as he activated his quirk for self-defense so he could escape. It wasn't much longer before another pressure arrived and filled them all with hope of escape as well as rescue. All for one. You're Reign of Terror will end forever right now. All Might called out as he attacked the villain. All Might, you sure took your time to get here. What did the Noma hold you back? The villain quipped before using a quirk to send the man into a building nearby. The villain then looked over at Tamura before informing him mentally about getting Bakugo out of the area so they could turn him to their side. But as Tamura was going to get Katsuki away from the area, the wall behind him blew up as Shoto, Ida, and Kirishima had arrived as the boy smirked. He flew up towards them as they took him out of the area so All Might could fight the villain without any interference between the lower-tier villains in the area. As Bakugo arrived in the area with Shoto and the other boys, he found Momo and Izuku nearby as he looked at Izuku with a smug smile. The girl looked disgusted with him before walking away with Momo, as she didn't wish to talk to him anymore after this. Bakugo noticed the disgusted look on her face as he followed suit only to see a billboard showing All Might fighting the villain. Izuku would have looked at the billboard, but she went back to the hospital as she wanted to make sure that she didn't get into trouble. She didn't enter the battle, nor did she assist in any way. She only provided the plan that would work best for them, that's it. The remaining battle between All Might and his nemesis would be televised on television, as the Battle of Kamino would go down in history as the worst fight to ever grace the screens. But there were two diurnal outcomes to the battle's end. One was the retirement of All Might, the symbol of peace, and also the subsequent defeat of All for One, once more, as he was arrested and placed in Tartarus for the foreseeable future. Izuku looked at the television in her hospital room as she watched as All Might's skinny form was revealed to the world, and she couldn't help but look worried for the man's future. The jig is up now. He won't be able to hide from the media without his muscle form anymore, Izuku said to herself as she sat on her hospital bed. It was right here that there was a knock on Izuku's room, and as the door opened up, it was revealing her mother, and she wasn't happy at the moment. If anything, she was extremely angry. Izuku looked over at the door to the hospital as she found her mother, giving her a cold look of indifference. Mom, W, what are you doing here? Izuku asked, looking slightly scared. I thought that you were going to a public school that has nothing to do with heroes. Izuku Midoriya. Inko Midoriya said, as she coldly looked at Izuku. I know what this looks like. I'm a part of the heroics course, though. I can become a hero, Mom. Izuku said, try to move the conversation away from the school and get her mother to agree with her. Dream finally. The school is becoming a boarding school, Izuku. I know that you wish to become a hero and that there's nothing I can do to stop it from happening. But I can't trust the school. You're going to, since they have done nothing about being attacked multiple times now. Inko said, sitting next to Izuku. Mom, I know that your trust in UA is losing its ground, but you have to look at it from their point of view. They had no villains for years break into their school, and one time that they do, you lose all the faith they built up over many years. They had managed to drive back the villains multiple times. Izuku exclaimed. This isn't up for discussion, Izuku. I am pulling you out of the school, and you're giving up your dreams of being a hero. This life isn't what I want for you, especially since you're now a girl. I can't have you going out there only to have unspeakable things happen to you, Inko said, as Izuku looked away from her mother. No, I will not give up my dreams of becoming a hero. I can't be anything else, Mom. It's all I have ever wanted to become, and there isn't anything you can do to change my mind, Izuku said as Inko stared at her son-turned-daughter. I knew that this would be impossible to talk to you about, so if you wish to continue down this path into your own death, then I won't be here in order to see you fail. I will be moving to America with your father, and I hope to never see your face again. I hope you get what you were hoping to get, Izuku, because as of this moment, I and your father disown you from our family, Inko said as she left the room. Izuku stared at the open doorway as she let what her mother sink in for her as she thought about her mother's words. As she disowned me? It had been a few hours since Izuku talked to her mother she kept that conversation out of her mind for the moment. Her mother gave her some money in order to keep herself going in their apartment, but Izuku knew that she would be moved onto UA's campus in order to live there for 3 years. She gathered all of her belongings as she thought about what her mother just did not even 8 hours ago in the hospital, as she's probably just joking around and using that to get me to join her. That's right. She loves me. So does Dad. Izuku thought to herself as she gathered her belongings. As she gathered her things, she never heard the pounding on the front door of her apartment as it became more and more loud. When she finished gathering her belongings, she heard a crash from a living room and found her teachers looking around the apartment for someone. Aizawa-sensei? All Might-sensei? What are you doing here? Izuku asked, concerned and unaware of how they saw her broken look. Young Midoriya, your mother wasn't answering the door, so we thought that something was wrong. Where is your mother? We need to inform her about the dorms being built on campus. All Might informed as Izuku shook her head. Oh, you won't find her in Japan anymore. She moved over to where my dad lives in America. Izuku said, as her eyes became duller than before. What happened? Aizawa demanded as Izuku informed both her mentor as well as teachers about what happened. That arrogant BSDRD, All Might, growled under his breath. To think that because of your dreams, she disowned you. From here on out you are a ward under the care of UA. I will be sure to inform Principal Nizu about this. Aizawa said as he glared at the picture that Izuku was holding. It was a family picture where Inko was standing behind Izuku when she was still a boy, and behind her was the father, Hisashi. Midoriya. The man was as tall as Aizawa himself and had similarly colored hair. The hair itself was as messy as Midoriya's, and he couldn't help but notice the faint trace of freckles on the man's cheeks. The one thing that alarmed him about the father and Izuku was the fact that his eyes were similarly green to the woman in front of him, although her green eyes were darker than his vibrant green eyes. After gathering the belongings of Izuku and placing them in the car, they drove OU to UA in order to set Izuku's room up on the girls' side of the dorms. It wasn't much longer before the other students arrived there, and Izuku was talking to Ochako specifically more so than the others. In fact, from Aizawa's view, she was leaning towards the transformed young man more so now than she originally was. Beforehand, he then saw the look Bakugo gave the brown-haired student of his, and if looks could kill, Bakugo would have killed Uraraka 10 times. Over by now, it was late into the night as Aizawa entered the Weiss of Nizu. He had gathered the information about the Midoriya family, and he couldn't be even more disgusted with them. As it turned out, Inko Midoriya was a villain who had given up on villainy in the States in order to try and raise her son-turned-daughter to become similar to her. As soon as the woman had reached the States, she had started up her crime syndicate again and was already making waves in the criminal underworld there with her husband. The man was a lawyer there and protected her from many of the crimes she had made over there, and the simple fact that drag trafficking, human trafficking, and many others were amongst the crimes under her belt. Aizawa was beginning to believe that Hisashi Midoriya had a strong hatred for the quirkless, especially the former quirkless. And by all rights, after looking into the past between Izuku and Katsuki, 2 of his best students within his class, the diurences between the duo were clear as day. From the previous school life of the two, Katsuki was destined to become a villain from his behavior too. The young girl, especially in the starting phase of the year, he had seen the camera recordings from Aldera Junior High as he watched his most incredibly meek student bullied by others, beaten and mentally/physically abused by Bakugo in person or around Izuku's range. It was disgusting to hear about how the young man had told one of his students to kill themselves in their last year of junior high, only to have karma hit them almost an hour later for saying such a thing, only for the bullied victim to come and save them from karma that was launched against the bully themselves. It was a tragic story for Izuku, growing up quirkless in a world revolving around quirks and abused mentally by his peers as well as apparently parents for the entirety of their lives until now. Izawa, what have you gathered on one Bakugo, Katsuki, and Midoriya? Sorry, Izuku, Nizu asked, as Izawa placed the files as well as port for his computer on the animal's desk. I got everything you asked for during the start of the year. I looked at some of it, and I didn't like what I saw, Izawa said, as Nizu nodded. I was looking forward to helping Izuku in his past of getting over the Stockholm Syndrome he had over Bakugo-kun, but it seemed like she found her way to get out of it and release its hold over her mind, especially since she spends most of her time with Uraraka Ochako. Nizu said, as Izawa looked at him. You knew that she had Stockholm Syndrome? Why wasn't I informed about this? Izawa looked at his boss concerned. It's because of the fact that Izuku is All Might's successor. The man had given his quirk to Izuku on the day of the entrance exams. She has spent all this time trying to gain control over it, and now that her gender has been swapped, she has gained more control over it, Nizu said, as Izawa looked at the animal. Was I supposed to know this information? A quirk that can pass on its own power to someone else sounds like a world secret, Izawa asked, as Nizu looked at him. Izawa-kun, you are Izuku's teacher, and it is my job in order to make sure that you can help her through gaining control of her quirk as fast as possible. With All Might out of commission, we have to rely on her to manage to take down All for One and Shigaraki Tamura on her own. Without the user of One for All, we can't win against the villains. A war is coming, and I want to be on the winning side, Nizu said, as he dismissed his colleague. When Izawa left, Izuku was seen standing in the middle of Battle Gym Beta as Bakugo stood across from her. Can you tell me why you're getting all lovey-dovey with round face? Katsuki asked as he glared at Izuku. When have you been worried about me, Bakugo? I don't have to answer to you anymore, Izuku said as she began to walk away. Why won't you look at me anymore, huh? Bakugo asked suddenly. What are you talking about? Izuku asked, as Katsuki looked more at Izuku. Ever since we started school here, you've done nothing but look at everyone else. You stopped looking at me, worshipping the ground I walk on. Why did you stop looking at me? Katsuki asked, as Izuku looked at him slightly angry. Maybe you should have stopped being a bully back in middle school when I gave you 10 years worth of chances to gain my trust back, Bakugo. But now that you're safe and sound, I want nothing to do with you anymore, Izuku said, as she continued to walk away from him. For the last few days, it felt like it was my fault that All Might can't win anymore. But now that I think about it, I remember what you told me on the second day of school here. Your quirk was given to you by All Might, right? Why'd you take it from him? Katsuki asked angrily. I didn't take it from him. He gave it to me on his own. He saw a chance to make me attain my dream of becoming hero. I know that this isn't the dream I wanted, but I will take what I can get. You were right, Bakugo. A quirkless person can't become a hero because it already happened, Izuku said as Bakugo released an explosion on Izuku's back as she flew across the ground, bouncing OU of the pavement. She turned around to see Katsuki glaring hard at her. You were supposed to stay quirkless, and I would have come back to make you mine. But you getting a quirk ruined everything, Katsuki growled out as Izuku's mind came to a screeching halt. What are you saying? Izuku asked, slightly fearful. You were always meant to be mine. I will make sure that you stay that way, because after this fight, I will make sure you will become mine in more ways than one, Katsuki said as he went for another attack. Izuku powered her quirk up as she went up to her maximum power, which was around 30% since the summer camp attack. Their attacks were swift as well as devastating, Katsuki's quirk powering his strikes as Izuku's quirk increased her endurance as well as defense. They traded blows against one another as they made sure to deal as much damage to the other in order to win. Katsuki was fighting to keep Izuku to himself. Izuku was fighting to free herself from the darkness of Katsuki's heart. She admired his strength as well as power, but she needed to move away from him so that she didn't completely cause his ego to overcome his strength. And that is what she did. during the fight. She stopped attacking Katsuki and just let the hits pile up on her, and as soon as he noticed how she wasn't giving him a fight, he thought that she was giving up. Smirking to himself, he jumped to the air as Izuku was going to show him what kind of person he really was. And as Katsuki fell down, powering up his quirk for his most powerful move, his howitzer impact, he noticed something about Izuku. She seemed resigned. Something wasn't right, and he would get to the bottom of it after he got his wish of making her his. As soon as he landed his attack on Izuku's body, though, he sent the girl flying through the smoke as she bounced on the ground as her clothes got torn up as BLD poured from wounds that were inflicted on her body. As soon as Katsuki stalked over to Izuku's down form, he picked her up by her hair as he saw her smiling at him. He let go of her as he watched her stand back up as if his attack was nothing. Taking her shirt, she still had a BR on that covered her generous chest as she revealed the scars on her skin that were from both his attacks from earlier that fight, but from years ago. Katsuki stared at the scars on her body as his entire being froze in place. He looked at each and every scar on her upper body as he looked more haunted than anything he had ever seen before. You see, Kaken, you did this to me. You placed it into my head that I couldn't be a hero, and you told me to commit. You were extremely lucky that I didn't follow your advice that day, because my best day was the worst day by far. Your words almost got me to commit something that would have taken me away from someone who really cares about me. If you really cared about me, would you have scarred me for life? Izuku asked as she moved to put on her shirt. As soon as her torn-up shirt was back on, someone else showed up, and it was Ochako who had arrived at the end of the battle due to the explosion that happened. He wasn't alone, though, as All Might and Aizawa were staring at the student with wide eyes. They didn't know that their student was scarred by their other student. Bakugo, you're under house arrest for the rest of the week. Uraraka, take Izuku to Recovery Girl, Aizawa said as he grabbed Bakugo with his capture scarf and pulled the nearly catatonic boy away to talk to Nizu. As Izuku was brought to Recovery Girl's Weiss, the old woman had started to treat Izuku for her wounds as well as burns. Ochako had been sitting next to Izuku the entire time, helping out the heroine with Izuku's injuries. Ochako had also seen the burns on Izuku's body as he gained a serious expression. I will make sure that this doesn't happen again. I can only hope that Bakugo is dealt with properly. Ochako thought to himself before holding Izuku's unconscious hand. The other students within the dorms had heard of the explosion as they were told by All Might that the situation was handled, and that they shouldn't worry and that those involved were okay. They all went to bed that night, unaware of Izuku and Ochako's presence being missing from the dorms. It had been a few hours since Izuku was admitted to Recovery Girl's Weiss after her fight with Katsuki Bakugo, and since he attacked her first, he was taken out of the hero track and placed into Gen Ed and replaced with Hitoshi Shinso from the sports festival. It hadn't been much longer than a day when Izuku woke up again as she noticed that Ochako was sleeping next to her on the bed, and Izuku, being the compassionate boy-turned-girl, had pulled the boy's face into her chest as she rubbed his head. She curled herself up into the boy's chest after releasing his head and turned her back to him in order to curl herself up even more. And it wasn't long before Ochako had curled around her much shorter frame as he pulled her close to himself as he unconsciously breathed in some air. After getting herself more comfortable, Izuku had fallen back asleep in order to get enough rest for the next day of school. It was exactly 5 hours later that Izuku did wake up, and she didn't know what was prodding at her, but she let it go since she didn't know what it was. Getting up from the bed, she looked over at Recovery Girl, hard at work in making sure that she was okay. Morning, Recovery Girl, Izuku said, stretching her body, not realizing that Ochako was now awake and watching her intensely. Morning to you, dear, and you as well, Uraraka dearie, Recovery Girl said as she ran a few tests on Izuku. All right, you are completely healed from your wounds from last night. Make sure that this doesn't happen again, all right? the old woman asked, as she raised her cane in a threatening manner. Don't worry, recovery girl, we won't. Well, I will try and make sure it doesn't happen again. Izuku said, blushing. Get out of here. Now, you both have a class to get to in about 1 hour. The old woman said, shooing them OU. It was now time for class as Izuku and Ochako were sitting next to one another as they waited for their teacher to enter the classroom. Their teacher finally entered the room as he had a deadpanned expression like he always did, although there was something wrong with it this time. It was as if he was mentally preparing for a slaughter of his classroom from some kind of villain. All right, class, you will be having your provisional licensing exams soon. Just be aware about the fact that after you get these licenses, you will be entering your work studies under certain heroes that you will be given. And in order to prepare you for these work studies, you will be facing one of the top 3 students within the school. Aizawa said, as he called in the 3 students who were conveniently outside. As soon as they entered the room, the class noticed how they all looked extremely different from one another as they entered. One was a girl who had periwinkle-colored hair and eyes and a very voluptuous body that had Mineta already drooling at them. She had a complete smile on her face as she was seemingly curious about them all as she talked to certain students about their quirks as well as their reason for becoming heroes. The next one was more scared of them, if anything. He had navy blue-colored hair and his eyes were more pointed since he looked scarier since he looked at them with a scary expression. It was then that the boy did something that completely caught them. Oh, you guard. I don't want to be here. I want to go home, the boy said as he turned away from them. He's more of a coward, the class called out in their heads. The last one was a blond man who was more muscular than some of the class himself, and he had a perpetual smile on his face. He had eyes which were similar to a cartoon character named Tintin, and he smiled at the class before he spoke. My name is Togata Mirio, and I hope that you all learn to become heroes faster than we did, the boy said as Izuku stared at him in awe. But before that, you should get your hero suits on and head to the gym. And once there, you will have your lesson for the work studies that you will be doing during the break between the fall and winter, Aizawa said as the class got up and went to the changing rooms. It was a few minutes later that Izuku and the rest of her class were in the gym as they stood across from their senpais who were happily looking at them. Wow, those are some costumes. I can't wait to work with you all in the future, Mirio said as he smiled at all of them. Aizawa-sensei, what are we going to be doing? Izuku asked as Momo and the other students nodded along. You will all be fighting against one of them in order to learn about the experience you will gain from work studies. This is normally given to those who are in their second year, but because of all the villain attacks, you were given the chance to take the provisional license exam within the next month. So with this experience against those who have at least 2 years of hero work under their belt, and you are tasked to see how long you last against them, Aizawa said as he smiled evilly at them. As soon as that was stated, Izuku watched as Mirio was preparing himself by stretching his limbs as if he was preparing to attack. As soon as the man stopped stretching his limbs, he looked at them all, preparing for his first attack, and nodded to himself before phasing through the ground. Izuku looked around the place before she heard her classmates being taken down behind herself. Looking behind herself, she watched as all the long-range fighters were taken down almost immediately, and as soon as she moved in to attack him, as he was about to fall down into the ground, she slammed her fist into the ground as soon as he seemingly phased through the ground, and it wasn't much longer before the boy had appeared in front of the mid-range students as they were knocked out immediately as well. Izuku, Ochako, Shoji, Sato, as well as Hitoshi were all that were left as they stood in the middle. Izuku was at the forefront of the group as she looked around the place as she tried to predict where the person would come out again. But as soon as she left the group herself, the man came out in between them all as he took all of them down, leaving Izuku all on her own as he appeared in front of her, sending a kick her way. Izuku dodged the kick as she jumped back as the boy fell into the ground, and as she looked in every direction. She thought about how she felt about his quirk and experience of fighting such a quirk. She then felt like he would attack her from behind, and as soon as she turned around to attack him, she pulled her fist back and activated 31% of her quirk as she moved it towards the ground as the boy had appeared there where she predicted he would come from. Almost as soon as he finally appeared behind her, he noticed how her fist was literally extremely close to his face as he used his quirk in order to keep himself from being hit in the face. Izuku jumped back in order to keep her distance from the young man, and as soon as she tried to attack him again, he used his quirk on certain limbs in order to attack her through her guard. As soon as her face felt the fist of the boy landing on her cheek, she was sent flying across the field a few meters before landing on the ground. It was kind of a funny situation since she had her rear in the air as her face was buried in the ground from landing on it. As soon as she got herself up from the ground, she shook her head as she looked around to find only legs standing in front of her, and as soon as she went to look up, she saw something she wasn't and blushed extremely hard before steam started to come out of her head as she fell backwards as the man's willy was out for show, and she got an up-close look at it. A few minutes later, the young man apologized for how he fought them without his hero suit since he wanted to show them as fast as possible. That experience wins over power. Izuku wouldn't look at the boy as Ochako fretted over the girl, as she buried her face into his chest, as she couldn't help but keep thinking about the man's willy in front of her face as she was knelt in front of the man. As soon as the class was over for the day, Izuku walked over to her bedroom as she got her things ready for when they could mentally prepare for the written portion of the provisional exams. As she was grabbing her textbooks, she heard a knock on the door and walked over to open it and found Ochako standing there smiling at her. "Hey, Ochako-chan, how are you doing?" Izuku asked as the young man laughed and told her about how he felt. "It's fine, just worried about you since the battle against our senpai," Ochako said, as Izuku blushed again from the memory of him. "Actually, there was something I wanted to ask you about, Ochako-chan," Izuku asked as she rubbed her thighs together. For some reason, she couldn't get it out of her head about the man's PP being in her face as she looked at her close friend, that is her boyfriend. No matter how many times she thought about it, she couldn't get it out of her head about it being scandalous about her being in a relationship whilst in school. "Seeking you, show me, you know?" Izuku asked as the young man next to her looked concerned. "What are you talking about?" Ochako asked, confused. "You, remember why I was blushing earlier today?" Izuku asked as the boy recalled. "The event." "Oh, it was Senpai's PP, right?" Ochako asked, completely unaware of the meaning. "Why, yeah. I just want to make a conclusion about something. Especially since he was T2. Small for his to be, big, compared to how mine was before I became this," Izuku said as Ochako finally blushed crimson at the knowledge of Izuku's question. "You, are you sure? I know that you had one before becoming a girl, but are you sure that you want to look at mine?" Ochako asked, as Izuku took in a deep breath before nodding. "Lime." Ochako stood up from Izuku's bed as he pulled down his jeans, as well as took them OU for Izuku to get a closer look. From what Izuku could already see, he was pitching a tent that looked really painful. So, as she got closer to his PP area, she started to pull his boxers OU his lower body as she watched as the PP gets slowly revealed. As soon as she managed to get the boxers lowered enough that the PP could be freed from their prison, it jumped back up and smacked her on the chin. Eep! She jumped a little from the contact on her chin. Once she pulled the boxers OU the boy as he kicked them away, Izuku looked at the size of her boyfriend and compared it to when she used to be a boy. "Strange, yours is just slightly bigger in terms of G-girth," Izuku said as she softly touched the PP of her boyfriend. As he groaned softly at the touch, Izuku began to realize what she was doing, but couldn't stop herself from exploring further. Feeling confident in herself, she started to cover his PP with her hand and found that it was slightly bigger than her palm as she started to move it up and down, as Ochako started to groan as well as softly to her. Touch Izuku was noticing that her heartbeat was increasing as well. She increased her speed as she felt herself bring her face closer to his phallus. She did faintly notice how she felt her core being heated up as she moved one of her hands to go deal with the heat. As soon as her face was right in front of the head of her boyfriend's phallus, she decided to bite the proverbial bullet. As she looked up at his face and found it in pure joy as she placed his phallus inside her mouth. The effect was immediate as he loudly and held her head there as he struggled to stay standing upright. Izuku felt herself freeze up in Ochako's slightly strong grip over her head, and for some reason she felt that she was fine with her position. Swirling her tongue around his phallus, she started to SCK him OU as she added a suction as if she was taking in a deep breath, causing him even louder. She had felt him slowly move one of his hands to reach towards her chest, but she looked at him as he looked into her eyes for permission before she nodded. She released his phallus as she pulled OU her shirt and BR as she revealed her melons to him as he looked at them in shock. They're as big as Minas, Ochako said as Izuku switched herself to sitting on her bed as Ochako stood in front of her this time as she covered his phallus with her melons. With how soft her skin was, the boy nearly released on her from the sensation of being trapped and Izuku being in control of the situation. She looked up at him before moving her melons in an downward motion as she placed her mouth over his phallus head as she added some more suction to it. Within the next few seconds, he started to grab her head as he pulled her down a little as she felt his phallus twitching to be allowed his release. Izuku then decided to release her melons from his phallus and push her head further down his phallus as she added the most suction she could as his PP reached the edge of her throat as he finally released. She felt as if gallons of his release was being dumped down her throat as she felt her mouth slowly fill up with the remaining amounts that never made it down her throat on the first go. As soon as he pulled himself out of her mouth, Izuku tilted her head back as she got to tasting the release. It was strangely sweet, like mochi for her, but it was a bitter kind of mochi. Opening her mouth, she felt she really needed to show Ochako this, as she started to chew the remnants before swallowing it. Ochako watched as his release was chewed and swallowed, and followed the small lump down as he seen the lump move from her mouth, down her throat, and disappear around her chest. Lime over. Izuku sat there as she breathed softly as she regained herself before noticing that Ochako was slowly decreasing in size. AR, we gotta do this more? I think I have morning wood sometimes, Ochako asked as Izuku looked at him. And maybe on a safe day, Izuku said as she made no move to put her shirt back on. She decided to head to bed without her shirt and BR, and Ochako decided to climb into the bed with her as they laid next to one another. Izuku turned her back to him as she nuzzled herself into his chest, as she unknowingly rubbed her rear on his flaccid phallus, causing it to be even more sensitive as he felt it increase slightly in size. Maybe you don't rub your rear against me? Ochako asked, only to hear a slight snore from Izuku. Dang it, why are you so cute when you sleep? Ochako muttered to himself before pulling Izuku closer to himself, placing his arms around the sleeping girl's chest. Within Izuku's dreamscape, she found herself staring at the previous wielders of One for All, and the first user of One for All, Yoichi Shigaraki informed Izuku about what will happen now. You have managed to control at least a third of the power of One for All. You will soon be gaining the powers of the previous users. I can only hope that you can gain control over them in time, but the first ones who are the closest are... It had been a day since Izuku and her class had taken on Mirio Senpai in their training class for heroics. The class had been making their time used as they studied as well as trained themselves over the last few days in order for this day to come. Izuku was the most pumped out of the entire class, considering her past as a quirkless individual always wanting to become a hero. She and the rest of her class entered the buses at around 9 a.m. as they all waited for their teacher to arrive, to send them all OU. From what she knew, the place would be massive compared to the other training facilities that the school had. But this was manned by the HPSC as well as the country, so it would be completely filled with security to protect the future heroes who come in. It took a few hours to arrive at the place, and Izuku had been spending as much time with Ochako as possible since the whole Kamino incident and Katsuki incident. From the attack on her before the training with their senpai, Katsuki was given a slap on the wrist and was threatened with expulsion if he did it again. But they never really stopped the mental bullying the boy did to her on a daily basis, and nobody but Ochako had stuck up for her during that time. Because of this simple fact, Izuku was slowly losing faith in the protection of the heroes as well as her teachers. Since everything started in UA, her trust in her teachers were already setting the bar low since. Her previous teachers from her old schools had been very lax with Bakugo, and considering that both she and Bakugo were placed under house arrest for not going to bed like they were supposed to, Izuku was punished for it as well. Because of the simple punishment for apparently starting the fight, based on Aizawa-sensei's words, Izuku had been on house arrest for the last few days, with Bakugo being on house arrest for longer since he was the one using a quirk the whole time without supervision. They arrived in front of the building as Izuku had looked at the students coming in from all directions and from different schools. They were all getting OU the bus when a new group of people came up from behind them. They were wearing uniforms that were not too dissimilar to the Shiketsu High School's uniforms since the school was militaristic. "Hello, UA. I'm glad to meet you all," a bald man said, bowing to them all, slamming his forehead on the ground. "Eep, be careful, sir. Why, you might hurt yourself." Izuku fretted over the young man as she helped him up from the ground of his bow and pulled out a handkerchief in order to clean up his mess. All of the students from differing schools and backgrounds had entered the main building and waited in a hall for the proctor to arrive. They all started to converse with one another. Izuku, however, had stayed very close to Ochako since the boy was becoming more protective of her. Since their late-night fun, especially since Izuku had been more vulnerable since she could be taken by surprise a lot easier now that she was still learning to be a girl. The proctor had shown up and began to inform them all about what they were supposed to be doing in the first portion of the event. "All right, students, I hope that you all will listen to me, as this will be the only time I will state this. You are all supposed to get around 50 elimination points in order to move on to the next event before you get your scores on how you are as a hero. Any one of you in the first event who are hit on your targets 3 times are eliminated from the provisional licensing exams and will have to take them next year. And in order to increase the level of problems for you all, every one of you will be separated from one another to make it even more fair on everyone else," the proctor said as he smiled down at them with a mirth in his eyes. "The first event of the provisional licensing exams will begin in 15 minutes. Get into your designated zones before the test begins. Those of you who will not be capable of listening to these rules will be automatically disqualified from the licensing exams," the proctor said as he walked away from his position as everyone went to their designated areas. Izuku was extremely happy with the fact that she and Ochako were near one another. She was already thinking of combination moves the duo could utilize against their opponents. As she and Ochako were talking to one another in terms of planning, another person showed up near them as they gave them pat on the back. "Who are you?" Izuku asked, as it was the invisible girl who patted Izuku's back. "Hey, Midori, it's me, Toru. I'm glad that you've been all right since the whole gender swap between you and Ochako-chan. I hope that everything has been to your liking," Toru asked as Izuku nodded. "Do you mind teaming up with me? I don't wish to be left behind in this tournament thing, really. I want to get my license and become a hero as fast as possible," Toru said as Izuku nodded, allowing her to join their group. 3 minutes until the provisional license exam begins. Get completely prepared since you will be dropped into the thick of it, the proctor warned on the intercoms. As Izuku, Ochako, and Toru had stuck together, most of the other students in Class 1 had stuck together in small groups in order to keep themselves from being knocked out. Immediately, as soon as the buzzer had been called out, Izuku called upon 25% of one for all as she grabbed Ochako and Toru and escaped the area as the other students of the schools around them had arrived at UA's location. "What are you doing? We could have gotten so many points there," Toru called out as Izuku pulled them behind a rock. "There is something Aizawa-sensei had never told us about. It's something that I was able to pick up from one of the other students earlier before the proctor spoke up about the events. He stated that he couldn't wait until the UA crush was going to happen, since every time apparently everyone from the other schools take on the UA students and try to take them out in terms of competition every year." Izuku explained as both girls nodded, as they moved away from the area where the other students were taking on Class 1. The rest of the class had managed to create a distraction big enough to escape from the schools vying to take them all out. But back with Ochako, Izuku, and Toru, the trio were taking down smaller groups of students together with their combined moves that they come up with on the spot. Their teamwork was actually getting other teams as they heard that their school students were being defeated by a group of girls and one guy to team up on them. But the sad part is that the group of girls and guy is that they were able to hide within the darkness of the city in order to stay away from them. It was here that there was a comms from the proctor stating that a young man named Inasa Yurashi was able to move on, since he was able to defeat 100 students in one fell swoop. Time would pass as the group would find opponents and take them down and eliminate them. It got to the point the trio would be separated from one another, leaving Izuku all on her own in order to take on a group of students who took their class on at the beginning. As she was analyzing the students in the group, she felt the hair on the back of her neck rise as if something bad was about to happen. And as soon as she turned around, she found a blonde-haired girl looking at her. The woman would then reveal herself to be Himiko Toga in disguise as the girl from earlier that day who introduced herself as Kami Utsushimi. As she fought in order to keep her right to continue on, she managed to tag the girl out, and with luck on her side, that was the last person she needed to tag in order to move on to the next part of the exams. Following the roads over to were the students who had completed their task of getting 50 elimination points. She found that Toru and Ochako had already reached the area before her as she smiled at them happily. "You made it. I was wondering what happened to you all after that windstorm happened," Izuku called out, hugging both of them close, as they all talked about their experiences within the first stage of the provisional licensing exams. The rest of Class 1 had arrived as they managed to pass the first test of the exams. To all those who managed to pass the expectations placed upon you, congratulations on passing the first stage of the provisional licensing exams. You are all ready for the second part of the exams, the proctor called out on the intercom as a loud earthquake happened outside the room. As they all moved to see what had happened, they saw that the entire zone where they were at was just destroyed and reduced to rubble as the proctor spoke up again on the communication relays. "Your new mission is very simple. Evacuate any and all civilians and start first aid before bringing them to the LZ before the exam ends. There will be a villain who will come out during the portion of the exam where everything seems to be going perfectly to plan. You will all start within the next few minutes, so use the bathroom as well as get your drinks of water or whatever beverage you need, because you will be working overtime in order to pull civilians out of rubble as well as find them underneath the ground," the proctor said, as Izuku gained a determined expression on her face. Looking at Ochako and Toru, they both had the same looks of determination as her as they moved closer to the edge of the area to get a head start over the others. As Class 1 are preparing for the second event of the provisional exams, other students of the schools who managed to pass the first event were conversing with one another about a certain trio. The three were sitting with one another as they were preparing for the next event of the provisional exams. All right, so we will need to split up for this part. I will be one of the main enforcers in the protection squads around the rescue yurts. If there's a villain who shows up during the event, we will need to have me and a few others who are more combat-oriented to hold them. Izuku said, as Ochako and Toru nodded their heads. As they continued to talk to one another, a boy who had taken on the entire class of 1A earlier in the first trial of the provisional exams had walked over to their group. Are you all seeing one another? He asked, coolly as Izuku looked up. I'm already taken. Ochako here is my boyfriend. Izuku said, softly as the man nodded. I can see that. How about you, miss? The guy asked as Toru looked at him with her body movement. No, but I got my eyes on someone else. Sorry, Toru said, as the guy slumped his body downwards as he nodded. All right, see you all later, he said, as the group had smiled at him as he left. As soon as the three had gotten there, nervousness out of the way, they were all called to head outside in order to begin the next phase of the provisional license exams. As the exam began its second event, everyone moved out in order to find a civilian prospects, as they were told to rescue them from the rubble. Izuku used her speed as well as strength in order to remove the rubble as well as get the civilians to the safe area as fast as possible so that the supporters could focus on their injuries. Izuku had a slight issue with her hesitation to take care of them because of nerves as well as adrenaline moving through her body. She had gone through many portions of the city in order to free some of the civilians in order to bring them to the safe area without having to run out of stamina. She took some time to get some air into her lungs as she shook her head in order to regain some breath. As she took OU again, she found herself saving others as well as leading other civilian prospects towards the safe area as time seemed to pass. As Izuku was attempting to pass over the rubble, she heard a loud explosion in the distance as she knew that was the area where Shoto and Inesa were located last. Shaking her head, she made sure to evacuate the civilian prospects and get them to the safe area as fast as possible, without running into certain villains. With Ochako, he was making waves as he managed to save some prospects from being buried alive with all the rubble with his gravity quirk. He was teaming up with Toru in order to make sure that they could get everyone out of the rubble as fast as possible, and they had heard the explosion on the other side of the arena, knowing that Todoroki as well as Inesa had it covered. They were moving about the streets when they ran into Izuku as she was flung through a building and into their street by one of the villains who were a part of the exams. Izuku stood back up as she launched herself back at the villains as she kept their eyes away from the civilians and had their full attention on her. Ochako and Toru had managed to escape from the area. As Izuku fought as hard as she could, Ochako was worried about how much power Izuku was using, though. It seemed to be really close to her full power at the moment that Izuku could control, and Ochako was getting more and more nervous about Izuku's percentage of her power. From how erratic the lightning was around Izuku, it seemed like she was using around at least 25% of her power in order to keep their eyes on her. They soon arrived at the safe area as they went to move towards Izuku's last known location, and as soon as they arrived at the area, they found it in ruins. There were the villains on the ground groaning in slight pain as they struggled to move about the area doing a very weakened army crawl. Ochako and Toru placed some hinkus on them all as they prepared to move on towards where the first explosion first happened. The other hero students could take care of the other civilian prospects while they searched for their ally. Over with Todoroki as well as Yurashi, they were moving some civilians around when the wall exploded near them. They had been looking at the person who had arrived and found out that it was Gang Orca and his crew of sidekicks. Well, it seems that I found some worthless heroes to take down. Who are you both? Gang Orca asked as he glared at the two hero students. Shoto, the boy said coldly as he stared at the current number 11 hero within Japan. I am Inesa Yurashi. I am going to become the hero. Wind Waker, I gratefully take you on. Inasa called out as he launched his gale force winds at the hero. As the hero was assaulted with the gale force winds that seemingly dried his skin up, he pulled out some water as he poured it down on himself as he smiled to himself. This would be a great lesson to teach these two students. They didn't seem to like working together as they released their attacks at the same time as both attacks clashed. Walking out of the winds, he smirked at them as they gained concerned expressions on their faces before he released a massive echo scream. As their hearing as well as depth perception was completely devastated, he moved forwards as he closed in on the dizzy boys. If you think an attack like that will take me on, you are sorely mistaken. I will show you the real reason why I am the #1 hero who looks like a villain, Gang Orca said as he growled at them audibly. As he attacked them with his martial arts as well as his quirks abilities, he made sure that they were disoriented the entire fight. And it was a very short fight as he managed to get them to collapse to the ground from all the sonar attacks to their hearing. As they struggled to move about the area, he watched as they had started to release an attack at the same time. Inasa had increased his wind flow to the point it moved about Gang Orca as it slowly dried him up from the inside out. Then Shoto had released his flames to increase the heat to slowly increase the hero's body temperature to force him to take some water into his skin. You are finally working together, something you should have done at the beginning of the fight. I hope you all become heroes in the future, but you fail this test. Gang Orca called out as he released a sonar attack, disrupting the combined attack of the children. Stepping forward again, he made his way over to the two before he noticed something entering his range at a very fast speed, pulling his arms up with his arm guards blocking the blow. From a new fighter, he found that it was Izuku who had arrived on the scene with a determined look on her face. They may fail this test, but at least they proved that they could have the courage to become true heroes. Izuku called out as she spun around and kicked the hero back as he slid across the ground on his feet. Smiling at the new arrival of Izuku, he moved forwards to make sure he could take her down when he felt something grab onto his left leg. Looking down, he found that it was one of the two boys, Inasa, if he remembers correctly, as he pulled his foot up and knocked the boy out. But that was all the time Izuku needed to move forward as fast as she could, since her kick to the man's gauntlet hands were enough to break them completely at 35% power. As she appeared in front of him once again, he blocked the blow to his chest with his palm as he felt the power of her attack course through his arms. You're definitely stronger than these two boys. Can you keep up with that power, though? Gang, Orca asked as he smirked at Izuku. When I gain full control of my power, I will be even faster than I am now, Izuku said, smirking back as she jumped back and avoiding a sonar attack from Gang Orca that he prepared. The two went into a slugfest as they launched multiple attacks at the other, as Izuku dodged around the blows that Gang Orca threw since she was physically smaller than him, as she managed to land fast but powerful strikes on his suit and tie that covered his torso. As soon as they were about to launch another attack at the other, a buzzer had come out just as they launched to one another's locations. Izuku had just used around 40% of her power in that last moment, which was over her current limit of around 37%, as she flew past Gang Orca as he stopped milliseconds before she did. She was flying past his head as she felt like she overextended and she was on a collision course for the wall behind the hero. But just as her full body had passed by the hero, he moved his arm back and grabbed her ankle and caught her before she could go over to the wall. That was a close call, young one. You are the one who broke their limbs in the sports festival last time I checked. Gang Orca made his analysis as Izuku nodded. The provisional license exams have been completed. All civilians had been evacuated from the city and have been successfully evacuated from the area. Those who remain should come back and use the bathroom as well as wash up before moving on to the ceremony for those who passed or failed, the proctor said as Gang Orca looked at Izuku again. As he sat the girl back on her feet, 2 other people showed up as they started to freak out about a hero being the villain of the exercise. I would have had an internship. Oh, for you Midoriya, had you managed to make it past Todoroki. Gang Orcus said, as Izuku looked at him. Why you would have asked for me personally? Izuku asked. Yes, I was impressed with your ability to reach the boy and get him to use his full power instead of half-assing it like I saw he was in the previous rounds as well as events. You are a true hero through and through. Now, if you don't mind, I see you pulling out that notebook of yours. Gang Orcus said, as he saw Izuku pulling out a notebook from seemingly out of nowhere. See, could you sign this? I'm a massive hero fan, Izuku said, blushing softly as the Orca hero smiled and laughed. Sure thing. Who is this to? He asked, as Izuku told him her name. My name is Midoriya Izuku, and I hope to become one of the best heroes from our generation. Izuku explained as she smiled at the hero. Well, I look forward to working with you all in the future. See you all when you become one of the greatest heroes of Japan, if not the world. Gang Orca said as he left the place as he moved his hands over his wrist-mounted gauntlets. She hit harder than I thought. I can actually feel some of my ribs throbbing in slight pain. Gang Orca thought as he left the place. As soon as all the students from around the other schools in UA had finally gathered in the middle of an empty field, they stood as they waited for the proctor to inform them about the exam results. All right, students, those of you who managed to get lower than at least 60 points on the 2 exams combined, then you fail this test. Those of you who managed to get 61 points or more, you have passed the test. But for those of you who failed, there's another way of getting your license. It will just take a bit longer for you all. The proctor said, as Izuku looked at the sign where the names of those who passed and failed were located. As she looked at the students who were on the passing list, she found that she was one of the top students who passed the test. She smiled at her name being amongst the students who passed the test for her provisional licensing, although there was some grunting as well as anger. Fuming from a boy next to her, looking over, she found that it was Bakugo. The young man had been very angry at the fact that he wasn't passing the exams, and he was very vocal about it. Izuku made sure to keep away from him, as she didn't want to remain near him as she moved herself over at Ochako's location. As it turned out, the only ones who didn't pass from their class was Bakugo and Todoroki, as they had been more selfish than others. As they were leaving the building, Izuku looked down at her license card that was in her hands as she smiled down at it. She also changed her hero name from Deku to Yamato. She smiled down at her paper as she looked at it closely. Tears brimmed the edges of her eyes as she had pulled out her phone to take pictures of a license. I can't believe this is happening. I have to show Mom and All Might, Izuku said, as she happily sent the messages with her hero provisional license to both people. You really look up to All Might, huh? Ochako asked, as Izuku flinched as she turned around. I guess I should tell you about that. But could we wait until we return back to the dorms? Izuku asked as Ochako nodded. As they left, they never noticed the jealous look from Bakugo as he glared at their retreating backs. As Izuku and Ochako were walking back to the dorms, Izuku thought about everything in her life ever since she found out about heroism. She thought about everything ranging from how she was treated as a child by Kakin and his cronies and the other peers who were supposed to help her in the past. She even remembers when her dreams of becoming a hero team with Kakin had been ignited as children when they managed to get the same play card of All Might as children. She reminisces on the past for a while longer as Ochako sleeps on her shoulder as she carried the young man all the way back to the dorms. Kakin, let's become heroes together. A younger Izuku called out to Katsuki. Yeah, we will become the #1 hero together. Izuku smiled to herself as she remembered the memory. Like it was yesterday, she couldn't help but tear up about the memory itself, since that was quite literally the last time Katsuki was nice to her. Shaking her head, she reached the main building of Heights Alliance as she brought Ochako up to his room and laid him down on his bed before leaving the room with a sad smile on her face. "Hey, Deku, we need to talk. Now," Bakugo said as Izuku looked over at the young man. "What do you want, Kakin?" Izuku asked, looking at him with a guarded expression. "Just come on, Mimi and Jim Gamma. I want this conversation between you and me to be completely between the two of us. Don't want people listening in on this," Katsuki said as he started to walk away. Izuku pulled out her phone as she sent Aizawa a message about Katsuki wanting to talk to her alone and making sure that he could be nearby if something goes wrong. As she walked to her bedroom, she found some clothes that would be good to wear in this weather at this time of night. As soon as she got on her t-shirt that said, ironically t-shirt on it, she left her room as well as looked down at her phone again to see a message from Aizawa on it. "Keep yourself safe. I am there already waiting for something to happen. Were you both?" Izuku smiled down at her phone before she texted him back, stating that she and Kakin were on their way towards Jim Gamma. Once he messaged back, thanking her for informing him about this, Izuku focused again on the talk she should be having with Katsuki. She had a really good feeling that this wasn't going to end well for her as well as Katsuki because of how he treated her in the beginning of the school year. "Sigh, I just wish Kakin would just leave me alone. I know we promised to become a hero duo when we were kids, but he betrayed me when he started to beat down on me when we were children." Izuku mumbled to herself. Placing her phone on record, she put it back in her pocket as she made sure to hide it as much as possible in order to allow her teacher to hear their conversation when they would begin. Arriving in Gym Gamma, Izuku stared down the street as Katsuki has his back to her and his body begins to tremble. "Kakin, what is the meaning of this talk? I know that you were angry at the end of the provisional exams, but you know that you can take the remedial course in order to get it," Izuku said, seemingly to try and bring Katsuki to reason. "What in the F did All Might see in you that he couldn't see in me?" Katsuki muttered, but Izuku caught it. "What are you talking about, Kakin?" Izuku asked as she moved slightly towards the young man. "I mean, what in the F did All Might see in you to give you his quirk? He shouldn't have seen anything in you. I was supposed to be the best, not you. So why is it you always beating me in everything?" Katsuki screamed out as he glared at the sky. "Kakin, being a hero isn't all about winning if that's what you're searching for me. It's about keeping the people safe as well as protected from all harm. Winning comes after that," Izuku said as she tried to grab the young man's arm only to have herself blasted backwards. "You don't get it. I have to be stuck here thinking that I caused the end of all. Why do I feel like all the things I did in the past were so horrible now? That you're a girl? I just can't get my head straight whenever I look at you." Katsuki screamed as he held his head. And for once, Izuku couldn't understand what he was wanting from her, for what it seemed like he really needed help. But she couldn't understand why he feels like he caused All Might's end of reign. "Kakin, maybe you should calm down. I know that what I'm saying is probably a bad thing for you, but you need to calm down before you do something completely reckless," Izuku cried out as Katsuki moved closer to her. As soon as the boy was in front of Izuku, he started to cry in her face as he sobbed about how everything he spent time on for becoming a hero was being tossed out the window. And it all started when Izuku's male body was changed into a feminine form. Izuku placed her hand softly on Katsuki's hand as the young man looked at Izuku as he stared down at Izuku. "I know the feeling of loss. More so than you think, Kakin. I felt it every time I tried to use my newfound quirk. Not only that, but I felt so useless for my entire life because of everything you'd done to me ever since my quirkless diagnosis. Even all the times you felt like a real threat to my safety, I still felt so useless that I even considered your words to me about a year and a half ago," Izuku said as Katsuki looked down at her. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his sobbing stopping as she stood in front of him drawing circles on his hand. "Remember the day that you told me that it would probably be better if I had killed myself?" Izuku asked, looking into Katsuki's red eyes as he flinched hard. "Yeah, that day a year and a half ago. That was the day that I thought that Everything that I did to get my old friend back, the old Kakin back, was gone. The moment you told me to jump OU a roof and pray for a quirk in my next life, that was the moment that everything set and that you weren't my friend anymore, Izuku said as she stepped away from Katsuki, who was now trying to grab her hands as Izuku placed them behind her back. Katsuki, I only care for you as a classmate now. Everything you had done for me in the past nearly got me killed because even now, I think about the words from you when I fail to make the expectations that All Might set up for me work. I sometimes wonder if I should still be a hero because of how everything is causing me too much stress. Even becoming a girl is stressful, Izuku said as she sighed. What is so stressful about being a girl, Deku? I thought it was easier to move around, Katsuki asked, confused as Izuku stared at him. All my life, I know that everything felt stylier as well as hurt more than it does now. My body at the time, when I was still a guy, just didn't feel right, and now that I am a girl, it feels just right. But it makes me more stressful because of my kind nature. Someone might take advantage of me. Ochako doesn't do that, but sometimes I feel like I can feel the gazes of other guys looking at me like I'm a piece of meat, Izuku said as she stepped further away from Katsuki as he continued to get closer. Okay, then me and round face can protect you from those kinds of guys, Katsuki tried to reason as Izuku shook her head as she pointed at him. You do the same thing, Katsuki. As much as I would never like to admit it, you're starting to become akin to those guys who look at me like I'm some piece of meat too. Screw. And I don't really like it unless it comes from Ochako for some reason. So please. I know. This talk was supposed to be about you and me, but I need to have you stay as far away from me as possible. I care for you as a friend and classmate, but it is leaning more towards classmate as of right now, Izuku said as she started to walk away. If it didn't sink in already, All Might's end of his reign is not your fault, Katsuki. It's mine, Izuku said as she walked away as she was pulling her phone out of her pocket to stop the recording. But as soon as it was done and she turned OU her phone, she heard the sounds of explosions popping behind her, and as she saw a reflection behind her of Bakugo about to attack her, she activated her quirk and defended herself with a roundhouse kick. As their attacks clashed in the air against one another, a shockwave was formed from their attacks. Izuku felt her leg burning up from the explosive sweat burning her skin. As Izuku jumped back as she activated around 35% of her quirk, she had managed to gain control of 35% of her quirk recently, and she wanted to use it right and not hurt anyone, but it seemed like Katsuki was destroying his last chance to become a hero. As Bakugo ran towards her, fury on his mind, Izuku went into full defensive mode as she waited for Aizawa to arrive in the area like planned. Izuku knew that Bakugo couldn't wait to start a fight tonight, especially since Izuku's feelings of causing All Might's true end since he didn't have his quirk anymore. As they moved about the streets of Gym Gamma, Izuku focused more of her time dodging each and every attack from Bakugo, but every time she tried, he would counter her dodge with an explosion right at her left arm for some reason. I try to make sure that you'd become mine after I graduated, but with you try your best to get in my way. Cannot allow this to happen, Katsuki screamed out, causing Izuku to feel something akin to fear once more as a memory of Katsuki from the past came up at the worst possible time. Izuku laid in the nurse's wise as she recovered from her attack from Katsuki. She had lost the arm that was now cauterized from the force of his explosion, and because of the cauterization of her missing arm, the doctors couldn't put it back, forcing her to be armless. She was now a disabled child within the school of UAS. She thought about everything leading up to how she lost her arm. She was currently inside of One for All as they pulled her soul inside of it in order to protect her from further damage as well. A shock hitting her hard. The previous wielders had informed her about what had happened while she was unconscious during the procedure in order to keep her BLD levels normal. It wasn't good from what they were talking to her about. She was getting to the point of which she was thinking she couldn't become a hero anymore. As she was having these kind of thoughts, within the realm of one for all, Nana Shimura, a previous wielder, came up to her and pulled the girl into a hug as she cried on her shoulder. Her left arm was now a mass of black and green mist, as it was replacing the arm she originally had within the quirk, as well as in flesh and BLD. As Nana was consoling the young lady with her issues about heroism as a one-armed heroine, the other users of One for All thought about how they should go about her route as a heroine. She could get a robotic arm attached to her body. I've heard in comics that if someone turns their body somewhat cybernetic, they can survive injuries like this, Yoichi said as he looked at the sad scene in front of him, whilst the other wielders of the quirk in their time had conversed with one another. One specific wielder was keeping an eye on Izuku, as their form was more concerned as well as worried about Izuku. The form was All Might's vestige that was forming slowly into the realm of One for All, as his vestige was feeling guilty for the actions of Bakugo. On the outside of the realm, and in the real world, All Might sat on the side of the girl's bed as he placed his forehead on the back of her right palm as he silently grieved over her loss. It had been a few days since Ochako had heard about what had happened to Izuku when she had gone out to talk with Katsuki. The boy was tried for attempted murder, as well as aggravated assault and maiming of a UA student. Needless to say, the young man was going to stay in prison for the rest of his life. The prison in question was Tartarus, and Ochako couldn't help but hew in slight cheerfulness as Katsuki was now out of their lives. He was always a more brash person who always got into a fight without thinking straightforwardly, and it is what caused his chance to become a hero. Ochako was walking towards the school's nurse's Weiss in order to check on Izuku, as he had been thinking about how the girl must be sewering within her own mind, going over the memory of fighting the young man. Entering the Weiss of Recovery Girl, Ochako found Izuku sleeping on one of the cots with a lot of bandages on her left arm, or what was left of it. It wasn't much longer before Izuku herself woke up from her forced unconsciousness given to her by her quirk. And almost immediately, she was looking for Bakugo since she was worried about him as well as his placement in the hero course. Where is KK Kakin? She called out as she tried to get up from the bed. You don't have to worry about him, Midoriya-kun. Katsuki has been dealt with by the principal. He was given XBLCT orders to leave you alone, and he went against those orders and tried to kill you when you had your back to him. All the teachers saw the recording in Gym Gamma last night. To think that you are this protective of a young man who only hated you until recently and wanted to show you that you belong to him alone. It makes me sick. Recovery Girl said, as Izuku looked at Recovery Girl with not sadness but relief. It was showing on her face that she was shocked, as Recovery Girl had left the room in order to allow Izuku to spend some time with Ochako, as the young man had started to inform the girl about work studies that were given to all students within UA within the hero course. Izuku had also gotten some papers that were for her to check, since it had something to do with Sir Naitai, since the man had noticed the young lady with her use of One for All. Once the young lady was ready to leave the nurses Weiss, Recovery Girl recommended Izuku to not go to her work studies since she would need to recover from the loss of her arm. Izuku just shook her head as she told Recovery Girl, I will need to learn how to be a heroine without an arm. It happens to heroes out there all the time. They get maimed by an opponent, and they need to walk at OU as if nothing had happened. I will need to do the same, just earlier, Izuku said, as Recovery Girl just nodded. As Izuku and Ochako were walking back to the classroom, they found themselves soon entering the classroom to find that their classmates were looking at Izuku with worry, well, except for certain few who were not happy with the events that happened the other day. Izuku looked at the students who were worried over her safety and asked if she would need help anytime soon with anything she might need assistance with. She told them that she would figure it out alone and just wanted to be alone, with the only one being capable of getting close to the young girl being Ochako. Their day of heroics classes went by faster than they thought it would, as Aizawa had them learning how to use their quirks to create super moves so that they could use them in their work studies. Izuku was stared at by Todoroki as the young man watched as Izuku had struggled to hold on to her case. The young man had been feeling weird about the boy-turned-girl ever since the event had happened, and now that Bakugo was seen as the main abuser of Izuku, he didn't know about what to feel about Katsuki Bakugo. For what the teacher stated about Bakugo was that he was the main abuser of Midoriya Izuku, but from what Izuku had shown to him and Ida, it was more or less a rivalry between the two that sometimes gets violent. Shaking his head, he watched as Ochako followed Izuku over to the women's changing rooms as he helped the young girl get into the girls' changing rooms. It was later on in the afternoon, after getting their asses handed to them, that Izuku properly met Mirio, as the young man had informed the young girl about how his quirk worked, and the sad mood the girl was in earlier that day was replaced with morbid curiosity as she kept trying to write down in her notebook about the new information about Togata's quirk. The young man had also told her about how Sir had wanted to meet her and teach her everything he knew in order to help her become the next All Might or become better than the man himself. The time frame between the work studies as well as the day for them all to leave was only around about 5 days, and Izuku was preparing mentally for fighting in a new fighting style. She had been watching a certain show that had a character that fought with a different style of fighting compared to others. Izuku was watching the Dragon Ball series as she watched a certain one-armed individual fighting 2 android opponents as he tried to save the future. Izuku decided to write down each pose for each attack used in the show as she decided to use them for a fighting style. She had decided to take on the fighting style that the man in the show was using, and it was a mix of the man's father's fighting style with his late master's fighting style. And as she had gone outside in order to try out the new moves, she soon found herself thinking about how to place herself in order to make her opponent take her less seriously, in order for her to take them by surprise. And she thought that how the man had pointed his one good arm at his opponents was not a good idea, so she started to look at some dummies she had placed out there to represent some opponents and pointed her missing arm at them. She had found out that it gave her a bigger depth perception that allowed her more viewing of where her opponents would move around. So as she lowered herself into her traditional stance when activating full cowling, she pointed her missing arm at the dummies before going for certain attack moves. As she went for a punch, she twirled her body around to do a massive roundhouse kick that was followed by a wide backhand before moving in for a downward vertical strike with her right leg. As she added the moves into her actual combat scenario, she smiled to herself as she decided to try and get her fighting style to be placed into muscle memory for the night. She nodded to herself as she cleaned herself up a little. Looking over to her right, she found Ochako staring at the scene with a smile on his face as he moved over to the girl as he pulled her into a hug. I see that you're learning a new fighting style to accommodate your missing arm. Want to test it out on me? Ochako asked, as Izuku nodded vehemently. Jumping back, as Izuku looked at him as she sparked, Ochako decided to speak up before anything could be stated as fact. No quirks, just a light spar with one another. We need to learn to fight without our quirks, Ochako said, as Izuku lowered her stance, once more turning her quirk as she moved forward. Ochako kept his distance as Izuku came with a wide roundhouse kick that was blocked. Izuku swung her fist in a wide backwards arc that had actually caught the girl-turned boy OU guard smacking into his cheek. It wasn't hard, but enough to send him backwards. Izuku then pressed her advantage as she kept being aggressive in her fighting style, as Ochako was pushed on the defensive. As soon as Ochako noticed that Izuku's body was much nimbler, he took in the fact that Izuku's body was a lot smaller, thereby making it easier to make riskier moves to land. It was these attacks that Ochako kept an eye out for and was impressed with how Izuku was capable of remembering attacks from shows and used them in an actual situation. Izuku went for one more attack when she felt that her leg was grabbed, and the girl was instantly slammed on the ground with her only arm behind her back as Izuku felt Ochako's body push her down into the ground. "I give," Izuku called out as Ochako pulled Izuku's body up a little. But for some reason the young man didn't let her go. Looking back at Ochako, the boy moved his face closer to hers as they shared a kiss with one another. "This position that I placed you in feels good," Ochako huskily said in Izuku's ear as the girl blushed crimson. Izuku was taking out the trash as she was still waking up from her morning with Ochako sleeping next to her. She was about to place the trash into the dumpster when she noticed a head sticking out of the wall. Thinking it was someone in trouble, she looked confused. "Are you all right?" she asked, leaning over to the face. "Hello there. Just came to see the local amputee on our campus," the face said with a cheerful voice. But apparently that wasn't the right thing for the face to say, as Izuku immediately lowered her gaze to the ground as she placed the bag on the ground and felt her non-existent arm. "I apologize for making you feel bad, but that's not what I meant when I said that. I just wanted to meet you after what I heard from my teacher about a student who got maimed by another one just a few days ago," the voice said as Izuku placed the trash over by the dumpster and reached for the lid. As soon as she lifted it up, of the dumpster, she activated her quirk as she grabbed the bag and placed it into the dumpster before it had fallen back down on the cover. Once she was done, Izuku turned around to walk away from the area so she could get some early morning training done. As soon as she was walking, she noticed the face coming out of the ground this time as she looked even more confused as she looked to her left to find that the face in the wall was gone. Kneeling down to the face, she poked it on the cheek as she pouted before then speaking to it. "Aren't you going to show me your full body so I know who I'm talking to?" Izuku asked with a small pout. "If I did that, I would be showing you my willy, since when I use my quirk, I am essentially losing my clothes before I even go through the wall," the voice said as Izuku blushed slightly as she nodded. "Well, I guess I will see you later then. What's your name?" Izuku asked as the voice responded. "My name is Mirio Togata, and I'm a third year within UA. I hope to see you at the work studies under Sir Naitai," the voice said before disappearing into the ground. Looking at the ground where it used to be, Izuku just shook her head before running back to the dorms, unaware of the boy watching her from the wall again. "Never will I place my face in the ground again. Never thought she would be wearing frilly underwear," Mirio said as he retreated into the wall again. Class 1A returned to their classroom as their teacher told them about the work studies that they would be leaving to do today. It was here that the third-year students who met them the other day entered the room as they informed them about who was coming with them to their respective work studies for the week. Izuku got up from her seat as she gave Ochako a kiss on the cheek and grabbed her hero suit that she had modified to suit her. Once the other students followed her lead, they got their hero suitcases and headed out with Aizawa not far behind to see them all. Izuku sat next to Mirio as the young man was very excited to see a new work studies partner to work with inside his school. "All right, so our work at Sir's place will be mainly training to better our quirks as well as predict our opponent's movements. The better our predictions are, the better heroes we can be. But there is also a prerequisite for joining the agency as a work study," Mirio said as Izuku looked at him confused. "What is it that I would need to do?" she asked as Mirio looked at her. "Well, you need to know how to tell a joke," the boy said, as serious as the day he was born. "Okay, so what kind of jokes does Sir Naitai like specifically?" Izuku asked as she pulled out her phone. "Well, he really likes light humor, but if you really want to get him laughing, you might want to bring in some dark humor. I don't know why, but he really enjoys dark humor. I mean, he told me to keep an eye on you since he found out about your existence," Mirio said as Izuku froze. "Okay, I will keep it in mind," Izuku said as Mirio gained a happy smile. "I'm sure that you will." Enjoy your time at our agency. It is filled with fun as well as serious things that we are sure to be a part of, Mirio said as Izuku nodded. Within the hour, the duo had arrived at the Night-Eye agency as they entered through the doors. Seeing pro-hero centipede Izuku ran over to ask him a few questions about his quirk, as well as ask for an autograph. Mirio had smiled at the happy look on Izuku's face as he released a sigh of relief that Izuku would fit right in with this place. The duo had taken the elevator up to the highest floor where Sir Night-Eye was waiting for them to arrive, and as soon as they were just outside the door, they heard laughter coming from inside the room. Opening the door, they found Sir Night-Eye standing in front of Bubble Girl, who was slightly from the tickling she was sewering from with tears brimming on the sides of her eyes. Sir said, before looking in Mirio's direction. Hey, sir, are you ready to take on patrol? Because I am ready like SpongeBob, the boy said, happily before being grabbed by the temples. Do not mention that feeble little sponge in my weiss, but you get a B+ for Ewart. Now, Bubble Girl, you can leave. I need to talk to Midoriya about something important. You will need to leave the room as well, Mirio, Sir said, as he looked at Izuku with a scrutinizing look. Once the two heroes were out of the room, Izuku sat down at the cushioned seat in front of Sir Night-Eye, as she stared at the man nervously. So, from what Mirio has told me, you would be a great addition to our forces within the agency. Care to give me a reason as to why? Sir asked as Izuku looked at her missing arm before coming up with a small dark joke. You know, I used to be a hero student, but then I took an explosion to the left arm. Izuku said, looking nervous. Looking at the man in front of her, his serious face was making it seem like she failed to join them until she heard Dark chuckling. Making fun of your own situation, that is a good thing too. Make a joke about to make a civilian lose their hope about you. But whatever you get for Ewart, now you must know the real reason why you are here, then Midoriya, Sir said as his serious look was replaced with an angered expression. Yes, from what I know from All Might, he said that you might try and get me to give my quirk over to Togata-san. From what I know, the quirk won't allow it to happen, and not because it chose me as its true wielder, Izuku said as Sir looked at her. What does that mean? He asked, serious but curious at the same time. I received some dreams about the quirk. It's alive, or at least it holds previous wielders of the quirk. I've talked to the first user of One for All, as well as the fifth user of the quirk, Izuku said, as Sir looked at her incredulously. There is no way, but putting that conversation aside, what is the reason as to why One for All shouldn't be given to Mirio? Sir Night-Eye asked, demanded. Because of the fact that Mirio would likely die within 2 years of wielding the power, Izuku said, as she kept her serious look on her face. What do you mean by that, sir? Asked, completely taken aback. One of the previous wielders of One for All, Shinomori Hikage. I did my research on the man before he met Banjo Daigoro. The man had a quirk of his own, aptly named Danger Sense, and he died within about 15 years after holding the quirk. He died of old age at the age of 40, Izuku said, as Sir gained a concerned expression. So you're saying that Mirio would rapidly age if he had the quirk for only 2 years until his body couldn't keep up with him? Sir asked as Izuku nodded. That is the most preposterous thing I've ever heard. This sounds like you're trying to find a reason to prove your theories about not giving it away, especially since you used to be quirkless, Sir said as he stood up from his seat. As much as I would love to say that I'm lying, sir, I'm a horrible liar. I should know because whenever I lie, I always stutter when I do, Izuku said, standing up. Are you prepared to make an enemy of the Night-Eye agency? Sir asked as Izuku went to walk away. Sir, I know a toxic situation when I see one. After all, I have been bullied before all because everyone thought a quirkless hero was completely impossible, Izuku said before walking toward the door. Well, you passed the test. A real hero shouldn't take the toxic reality that comes to them with a happy smile, but should fight back. You start tomorrow at 8 a.m., Sir said, signing the papers. Izuku looked over at him, confused as the man smirked at her with a mirth in his eyes. I have about a week to get you to. Learn how to predict your opponent's movements so that you can be an even better hero than both me and All Might. I will make DM ensure that you are better than All Might by a wide margin. I may be in but I'm still a teacher all the same. I will not turn someone away because of my opinion of who should wield the power of All Might. After all, I trained Mirio to be my successor, not All Might's. Smiling at the man for the first time since she first arrived, Izuku walked over to her papers as she looked up at him. I was hoping that All Might's second sidekick was going to be a funny guy. Never took you for being someone so serious but cared so much about jokes, Izuku said before walking out of the door. Mirio had entered the room as Nightai gained a glint in his eyes as he grabbed the young man and placed him in the tickle machine. You failed to make me laugh, and because of that, you will sue her for Midoriya, Nightai said as Mirio gained a pained expression. She said a dark joke, didn't she? Mirio asked as Nightai looked at him. She made fun of her own body. A hero shouldn't be doing that. They should have more confidence in their own body as well as confidence in themselves, Nightai said as Mirio chuckled. Well, I did tell her that you did like dark humor. I lied about the dark humor. I wanted to show you how much she felt bad about herself, but to go as far as self-deprecating humor. I think I messed up, Mirio said as Sir nodded. You tried to get her to cheer up and made her make fun of herself. You didn't know any better. But that doesn't mean I can't punish you for your actions, Sir said, as the tickle machine turned on as Mirio tried to tough out the tickling sensation on his body. Unknown to them, though, there was another person listening in on their conversation with one another as the woman left the doorway in search of a somewhat insulted girl walking through the building. I will make her feel better about her situation, Bubble Girl said with a determined expression. Izuku sat in her room inside the Nightai agency as she prepared her bedroom so she could make a call over to Ochako in order to see what she thinks about her work studies. She was just about to call the girl-turned-boy when she got a knock on her door, so walking over to the door, she opened it to reveal Bubble Girl standing there with a sad smile on her face. Hey there, Midoriya-chan. How are you feeling? Bubble Girl asked, looking concerned. I am fine. Just didn't expect my first work studies under Sir Nightai to be so serious, Izuku said as she struggled to find the right words. Hey, don't sweat it, girl, you have no idea what it was like for me when I first started here. Back then, he was actively trying to make people laugh. Hell, he even placed those who talked about his serious attitude in that tickle machine because they talked SHD about his serious looks, Bubble Girl said as she sat down on the seat outside of the door. Izuku joined the woman out there as they talked about their respective first times meeting the man Nightai, as Izuku gushed about the man's ability to see into the future. Bubble Girl watched as Izuku had went on and on about how she looked up to the man because of the simple fact that he managed to become All Might's sidekick and also made it a mission after leaving the hero's side to make his own agency to keep people smiling. It was a noble goal for Izuku, as the girl's ultimate goal was to make sure that everyone kept smiling, especially in the face of adversity. Hey, if you need someone to talk to about things that you wouldn't want those guys finding out about, you can talk to me. Okay, Bubble Girl asked as Izuku gained a confused expression on her face before she nodded. Bubble Girl would leave the girl to focus on her own things as the girl prepared for bed, and Bubble Girl prepared to leave the agency and head to her home. Izuku sat inside her agency bedroom as she activated the camera call with Ochako, as Izuku smiled at how tired the boy was. Hey, Ochako, Izuku started, as the boy smiled at the girl. Hey, Izuku, I can't believe that I was chosen by Ryukyu because of my uses. I can't wait to become a better hero under her tutelage. Who are you going under? Again, Ochako asked, after gushing about Ryukyu. It's Sir Nightai. He was All Might's sidekick, who helped him against those who could predict All Might's attacks. Izuku said as she gushed about her own work-studies hero she was interning under. The two would talk to one another for about another whole hour before both would turn in for the night, knowing about how the next day would be filled with training as well as patrols. Although one was completely unaware of what was going to happen on her first patrol within the territory of Sir Nightai the next day. Izuku would wake up at the crack of dawn the next morning with a happy feeling in her stomach as she left her bedroom in order to get a small breakfast in order to train herself. She had control over 35% of One for All, and she wanted to make sure that she could control about 40% of the quirk before she could start her patrol for the day. Once, eating a small bowl of cereal, she entered the training grounds of the building where she started to lift some weights and run on treadmills so that she could increase her base strength as well as speed. She would stay there until Mirio would arrive in the training room, as if in search of someone. Hell, even Bubble Girl was in the training room, increasing some gains. Hey, Midoriya, want to go out on a patrol with me later today? I want to show you around the city so you can get the hang of moving about the place. Mirio asked as he stood next to the girl as she ran. Sure. Things, senpai. I can't wait to show everyone what my new hero suit looks like. I couldn't get it done before we left, but I was told by Mr. Aizawa just this morning that it was delivered her before I woke up, Izuku said, as Mirio looked at her confused. What do you mean, new hero suit? The boy asked, as Izuku gained a sad expression. My old suit had 2 arm sleeves since I only have 1 arm. I changed the design to make sure that it supports my only remaining arm. It's not like I'm going to be capable of regrowing my arm on this patrol, right? Izuku asked as Mirio chuckled. Maybe not, but you should really start thinking about what you should be using for deodorant. You stink, girl, Mirio said, as Izuku swatted at him with her right arm. Once she had completed her training regimen, Izuku had left for the showers as she made sure that she was completely clean from all grime as well as dirt and sweat. Once she left the showers, though, she had taken a good long look at her toned and built body, mainly on the missing arm. She had that only went down to her left bicep as she flexed it a little before gaining a sad expression. Leaving the bathroom with her clothes in hand, she returned to her bedroom and put on her remade costume so that she could get prepared for her day on the road with Mirio. Once she was prepared as well as ready, Izuku left the room to see that Mirio and Sir Nightai were standing at the front entrance as she ran up to them both. Hello, Deku-san. Are you ready for your first patrol of the work studies? Mirio asked as Izuku nodded. I can't wait, Mirio-senpai. I wonder how people will react to my 1 arm, though, Izuku said before muttering the last part with a grimace. No sad looks in this building. Keep up a smile so that those around you don't lose hope in us heroes. Ever since the retirement of All Might, people are relying on us lower heroes more than ever since the hero had dropped from his pedestal as the #1 hero. And because of that retirement, the villains he had kept from coming out of the woodworks have finally come out to play. And it is our job to take them down before they can even do any harm. Let's go, we have a patrol to go out on. Midoriya, you will be with Togata. I hope you both know how to patrol from how you lived before here, Sir Nightai said as he took his own sidekick a urine direction. An hour would pass as provisional hero Deku and Lemillion would be seen talking to civilians as well as making their patrol around the city on their patrol route. The two were talking about the sports festival that happened a few months back as they walked through the city. They hadn't seen any action that required their attention, and they were passing by a small alleyway before Izuku felt something hit her in the leg, nearly knocking her over. Looking down at the little girl on the ground, Izuku, for some reason, felt some maternal instinct appear in her mind as she checked the little girl. Hey, little one, is you all right? Izuku asked as she kneeled in front of the small girl to make herself as non-threatening as possible. Izuku then watched as the little girl's eyes became completely fearful as Izuku picked the girl up and pulled Mirio away from the alleyway and walking away from the area as something in her mind told her to get the girl away from that alleyway as fast as possible. What's your name, little one? Izuku asked as they continued back the way they came. Lemillion was looking at her cautiously as she took in the child's form, and he was keeping an eye on their surroundings too. Make sure that they weren't followed. He also called in for Sir Naitai, telling him about the situation they had and that they were returning back to base. They got a call back from the man, stating that he'd be scolding them about what they did, but was happy for them. Emma, my name. I is Ieri, the girl said as she trembled in Izuku's arm. Do not worry, Eri-chan. We will keep you safe. Can you tell us who you were running from? Izuku asked as Eri looked at her. The little girl could see the kind nature behind the emerald orbs that stared back at her as she worked up the courage to speak. HH's name is OO Overhaul. I don't know who he works for, but he can take things A apart and P put them back T together. He was using my BBLD for something H horrible, Eri said, as Izuku looked at Mirio with a completely fearful and concerned look. Well, it's a good thing we took you from that alleyway then. Was he following you? Izuku asked as Eri nodded her head. Deku-san, we shouldn't have done that. He could put civilians in danger, Mirio said as Izuku glared at him. So you're telling me to not save a little girl who obviously seemed to be in pain as well as fear from the moment she looked at us? Izuku asked as the boy rightfully shut himself up. He knew that the girl was right, but he was trying to do everything the way he was taught by Sir Naitai. He would allow Sir to scold her for her actions. Later then, by the time they reached the agency, they entered the building looking behind them, as if someone was looking where they had gone. Izuku placed Eri inside her room so that the girl could get some sleep, as Izuku left an apple in the room for the girl to munch on in passing time. What have I told you about split-second decisions, Mirio? Sir yelled as Mirio looked ashamed of his actions. Sir, if there's anyone you should be saying that to, it's me. Mirio was the one to tell me that I should have not done what I did, Izuku said as she walked over to her work studies. Teacher, what you had done was incredibly reckless. Do you have any idea what could have happened had you been a second later from fleeing the area? Sir asked, as Izuku looked at the news, seeing a bunch of dead corpses on the ground in the alleyway. They had found Eri. They don't look like civilians, though. They look like Yakuza members from before the Quirk era. More like plague doctors. Izuku muttered to herself as Sir Naitai had stopped his train of thought. What are you talking about? He asked, a little impatient as Izuku paused the screen. On the bodies. What did civilians state that they saw the recent gathering of the Yakuza in the area, Sir Naitai? Izuku asked, as the man gave a small description. They had masks that resembled a bird's beak. What does that have anything to do with plague doctors? Sir asked, confused. Well, if you read your history, Sir Naitai, plague doctors are what present day doctors were before the actual medicine was created as prescriptions for everyday use. Izuku said as she pulled up an image of a plague doctor. So these dead bodies are that of the Yakuza. But that means that Overhaul had killed his own men, which probably means that they were in charge of keeping Eri from being found. As much as I should apologize for how I acted towards you, your actions still got some people killed. You should be prepared that even your actions had been for the act of good, they can still cause future actions made by villains that are the direct result of said good intentions. Sir said, as Mirio spoke up. For every action, there is an equal to opposite reaction. The boy said, as he grimaced. I'm sorry that I felt something that I never felt before when holding a little girl in my chest, who, by the way, had bandages on her arms, legs, as well as probably torso. I don't know why, but I felt a strong urge to protect Eri the moment the little girl was being held in my arms, especially since she looked me in the eyes with fear, Izuku said, as Bubble Girl had entered the conversation. That was oxytocin, the literal herm that bonds a mother to her child. If you had that kind of reaction to Eri, then that means your maternal instincts as a mother came into play for that little girl. Bubble Girl, informed as Sir Naitai, had placed 2 fingers over his temples as he rubbed them out with a sigh. Great, we now have a hero student who had accidentally imprinted on a little girl of around 7 years of age. What's next? We get attacked by an entire Yakuza group? Sir Naitai asked, exasperated. Yes, sir, you shouldn't joke about that. You are tempting fate with that. Action, Izuku said, as Mirio chuckled a little from her slight joke. Sir Naitai stared at the girl for a moment before an evil smirk came across his face as he managed to grab the girl's remaining arm and drag her to his waist, where everyone could hear incessant laughter coming from a room, as well as the cackling of Sir Naitai. As well, they felt extremely bad for Izuku, but at the same time, they couldn't help but laugh at her situation. The one time she made a slight joke, she got placed on the tickle machine for it. How ironic. Speaking of irony, too, members of the Yakuza had been watching the Naitai agency as they had been hearing what the group were talking about before contacting their boss. If Eri was inside the agency, they would make sure to bring the girl back before anything bad happened to them. Overhaul was a very bad man to steal from, and a one-armed hero student had been capable of doing so almost as fast as All Might was capable of defeating the strongest villain in the underworld of heroics. Waking up the next day, on her third day of her work studies, Izuku had gotten out of her room to find Eri as she found the little girl sitting on the couch, getting some breakfast from the kitchen of the agency. Izuku left it with some cereal as she sat down next to the girl as she looked at the television. Once Izuku was eating her food, she never noticed a presence behind her looking at both of them with a mirth in their eyes. Eri had taken the moment that Izuku was eating her breakfast in order to lean onto her remaining arm and hold it close to herself, and Izuku was completely unaware of the fact, since she was still trying to wake up. Once she had completely eaten her breakfast, she had placed Eri on her shoulders as she went to place her bowl in the kitchen sink in order to get straight to training so that she could master more of her quirk without having to break herself. Once the duo had entered the training room, Izuku had taken her shirt, revealing her wearing a sports BR over her chest as she started to do some weight training as well as some leg training on the treadmills in order to keep herself in shape. Once her morning ritual was completed, she looked over to see what Eri was doing, only to find the girl attempting to use the weaker weights as she started to lift some 3 P&D weights like Izuku was smiling at the girl. Izuku walked over and showed her how to actually do it without hurting the little girl's body from doing it wrong. Once the two were done with their workouts, Izuku went over to her senpai's room in order to wake him up, and knocking on the door, she soon found him looking sleepy as he opened the door. "What's up, Kohai?" he asked, slurring it out in his grogginess. "We'll need to be prepared for anything, senpai, so you should probably wake yourself up," Izuku said as the young man nodded. Whilst that was happening, the two were unaware of the fact that an entire army of Yakuza were making their way over to the Naitai agency in order to bring Eri back to overhaul. It has been about a few hours since Izuku had woken up from her sleep, and there was 3 things that happened in that time frame. 1. The Naitai agency was attacked, placing some of the Naitai's sidekicks into the hospital. 2. Mirio senpai was incredibly guilty, thinking that he was at fault since he wasn't fully awake to protect his allies. 3. Izuku was finding out after she had been knocked out by one of the villains that Eri-chan had been kidnapped by the Yakuza and was not taking things well. In fact, the way she moped around the place caused both Naitai and Mirio to look around for evidence that this was the Yakuza that they were in fact looking into, only to find out that it was. With that information, they had soon found a member of their group, and Naitai used his quirk in order to see that grunt's future. Results were varying, and he now knew where to find Eri-chan so that they could bring her back. All that remained now was to get her out of the hands of the Yakuza so that she could be free and return back to Izuku, who for some reason was acting like a lovesick mother. Many agencies had accepted his plea for assistance once they found out how dangerous this Yakuza villain was. The ones who joined the raid that was going to happen in about a week's time was Pro Hero Rock Lock, Pro Hero Fat Gum, Underground Hero Eraserhead, who had seen how sad Izuku was when he found her, top 10 pro heroine Ryukyu with her. Interns of Nijire-chan, Uravity, and Froppy. With Fat Gum as interns were Tamaki, Amajiki Red, Riot, and surprisingly Kriati. As they all talked about who else to bring to something this dangerous, they all thought that Endeavor was too much for this kind of thing, so they just decided to bring Mirko since she could get to overhaul as well as attack him fast enough to get away without being killed almost instantaneously. But once they tried to get her in on this raid, she just stated that she didn't deal with low-life criminals. So she was out of the fight, but their raid had all the heroes required to start it within the week. And as the students were told to return back to school so they could catch up on their piling homework, Izuku was completely down in the dumps as she had been thinking about Eri the entire time. Her classmates did take notice of this event as well as they were doing their very best in order to cheer her up, but it never worked. Uraraka was the only one who could get close to her without having the girl lash out her pent-up anger as well as sadness as she confided in the young man about everything that happened. It wasn't until around the time where the raid was going to happen when Aizawa called the students entering the raid with all the heroes. He informed them that night I had read one of their futures. It was completely on accident, but one of them will be dying in this raid, and there would be nothing they could do. And Aizawa looked specifically at Izuku as he stated this, but the girl wouldn't be having any of it before telling her teacher, I don't care if I die in this raid, so long as that little girl is saved, I will rewrite fate. Izuku said, as Aizawa grinned at her. Well, far be it from me to tell you to stay behind. Just remember that you aren't as active as a hero without your second arm. Aizawa said, as Izuku nodded. They all would be sent out the next day in order to start the raid on the Shai Hasaikai main base of operations. The Yakuza group were so cocky that they wouldn't ever think that the heroes would make a raid on them, since the known sidekick of All Might was raided by villains and was seemingly defeated. So, when a Yakuza thug had opened the door to only be met with a furious punch to the face by one of the heroes, they smacked right into their allies, knocking them all out, turning the raid into a stealth mission in order to bring Eri-chan back to safety within the heroes that she had been saved by. Izuku was going on a rampage, though she would knock out any and all villains in the building she had come across, with Mirio coming after her. As the duo had gone through many walls created by the panicking villains, they had finally caught up with the main villain of the group, who would be ranked as an S-rank villain, Overhaul. The man was looking panicked as he was in search of Eri, but was found by Izuku and Mirio before the man could find the girl, but had to fight the two enraged heroes, with Izuku and Mirio coming in faster than the villain could predict. He had to call for backup, but even those backup villains couldn't do anything because as soon as Mirio caught sight of them, he left and knocked them out before coming back almost as fast as Izuku did. The villain was backed into a corner as he tried to absorb the villains that were knocked out but couldn't, since Izuku and Mirio wouldn't allow it to happen. It got to the point that since he was taken OU guard, he completely forgot about how his quirk could destroy one of them with a single touch of a finger before he was approached by Izuku from behind, who had managed to unlock a new quirk in her rage as black tendrils had flown out of both her remaining arm as well as the stump, forming a new arm out of the black mass and allowing her to send a massive attack to the back of the villain's head, knocking him out instantly. We got Overhaul. Night Eye. We are getting him wrapped up and heading back to you, Mirio called out as they both heard a child behind them. Looking behind herself, Izuku smiled as she saw Eri-chan, looking at them with shock as well as slight fear. Izuku ran over and pulled the girl into a hug with her one arm as she cried into the girl's hair, causing Eri to be completely confused as to why the girl who saved her before was crying for her sake. Picking up the girl and handing her over to Mirio for the moment, Izuku had wrapped the villain up in her black tendrils tight enough that he couldn't escape from her grasp, even having his hands out and away from his body and close together as if her tendrils were Hindkiss. As the duo had started to leave the place, they had taken notice of Himiko Toga and twice staring at them in shock as the two stared back at them. If you're going to attack, you better do it now. I would rather not allow Overhaul escape with Ericon again, Izuku said, as both villains had decided to book it out of the area. They knew that, with the heroes there, they wouldn't be capable of actually being able to defeat both Mirio and Izuku on their own. They could sure overwhelm the two heroes, but twice at this point in time. Hadn't been capable of learning that he was the real one, so they left the place without even fighting. You know, we really shouldn't be allowing them to leave, Mirio said as Izuku nodded. I know, Himiko is just, she is lost because nobody was there for her when she was all alone. I'm going to see if I can save her from a path of villainy. The one she is one is too dangerous for her, Izuku said as Mirio nodded. Once they made it to the other heroes, they were surprised that some fighting was still happening between Ryukyu and another villain wearing the plague. Dr. Masks. Once Izuku placed Overhaul in police custody, they had left with the villain so that he wouldn't be capable of causing even more mayhem. They even had Quirk canceling cues on the BSDRD. Izuku had then moved to assist the heroes with taking down another member of the 8 Bullets within Kaicha Sasuke's smaller circle of fighters. By the time it was noon, all the villains from the Yakuza were captured and taken into police custody, and Night Eye's prophecy was completely negated due to the powerful and new quirk that Izuku had manifested in the raid. Also on another note, Sir Night Eye had survived the raid, so he was still capable of teaching both Izuku and Mirio about how to be a hero from his point of view. All the UA students returned back to UA as they were watching something on the television, and before they could even say anything, they heard the front door open up. Looking back at their classmates, they soon found Izuku walking through the front doors, arms swaying as she looked happier. Wait, arms. Sure enough, on Izuku's missing left arm was a new fleshy arm that was replaced when she got to the surface. Apparently, Eri had been scared the entire time, and since Izuku's pain tolerance was so high, she didn't feel herself being rewound by a few weeks, but for some reason could still use the quirk she gained as well as use a much higher percentage of one for all. It was surprising for her when she found Aizawa at the end of the raid using his quirk towards her and Eri before she noticed her arm was back in its full extent. Izuku had cried for hours when she found her old arm back in its original spot, scars and all. So when she returned back to the dorms, she had grabbed Ochako and pulled the young man up to her bedroom in order to have some cuddle time with the young man. The two were currently in her bed at the moment as the young man was hugging her close to him as Izuku snuggled into his warmth. I'm so glad that my arm is back. Now I won't be losing to you in our sparring matches, Izuku said as she glared at Ochako in the face as the young man chuckled. Well, I won't be holding back any less than I have been, Ochako said, kissing Izuku as the girl into it. Wrapping her arms around the young man, she moved her body to being on top of Ochako as the young man wrapped his arms around her waist. Looking into one another's eyes lovingly, Izuku laid herself down and allowed Ochako to do what he wanted for the moment, which seemed to be nothing in particular, and Izuku started to blush slightly when she sighed before taking OU her shirt and tossing it OU the bed, allowing her chest to be seen by her boyfriend. Are you sure you want to show yourself to me? He asked as he looked like he was blushing up a storm. Feeling a small tent in the boy's pants below her rear, Izuku smiled before nodding as she moved OU of the boy and turned her back to him and pulling his arms around herself. They would both be asleep in a matter of a few minutes when their classmates would look in their direction from the girls' room. This marks the end of part 1 of What If Deku was hit with gender exchange quirk. A big thanks to Anthony Tyler 9 for granting the permission to feature this amazing fanfiction. Please like the video and subscribe to Deku Universe for more interesting stories. Thank you and see you soon.